Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto awakens hollow from his bloodline part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. To Rukia Kuchiki, modern day humans often seem to be an eternal mystery. But after having spent a whole week trapped in the human world, she was finally starting to believe she had managed to figure them out. But as fate would have it, she was thrown for a loop once again when she arrived at Karakura High alongside Ichigo to find the entire place had been painted orange and pink. If the dazzling and bright colors weren't enough, there were black and white spirals painted here and there all over the building, and from every window hung a string of underwear, belonging to both male and female, slowly flapping in the wind. Directly in front of her, across from the main school gate, and painted onto the side of the now pink central building, was a cartoon-stylized red fox head. Its right eye was closed in a wink while its left was wide open with a blue pupil. Its mouth was happy and open with a tongue that curled upwards and was hanging from its mouth. Beside the head was a furry red hand with its thumb stuck up. Rukia heard a groan coming from the orange-haired boy who was standing beside her. Not again. Rukia nodded her head in agreement. While I do feel that the school could use some brightening up and lighter colors to make it more child-friendly for those learning there, I do think the underwear is a little inappropriate, commented Rukia, her right hand on her chin and her left on her hip in a thinking pose. What? No, Rukia, this wasn't planned out by the school. For as long as anyone in Karakura can remember, weird stuff like this has happened. And whoever does it always leaves that picture of a fox behind too, explained Ichigo, crossing his arms with a huff. Rukia's eyes widened a fraction at Ichigo's words as her mind considered the possibilities of what this could mean. But before she had time to comment on her thoughts, someone rudely barged past her. Ichigo's hand quickly extended and caught her arm before she could hit the floor. He was about to turn around and yell at whoever had barged past until he noticed the tacky brown suit the guy was wearing. He was a teacher. My underwear, came the teacher's stuttering words, his eyes comically wide. Mine too. This time a female teacher came forward, her mouth agape with disbelief at the sight of her bra and panties dangling from a window. Pretty soon all the teachers were there, even Miss Oki muttering in disbelief at the sight of their undergarments hanging from the school windows. They didn't seem to notice the school kids that had crowded round them, one of which had yet to learn any tact during her short period of stay in the human world. Wait, said Rukia, if all of their underwear is hanging from the windows, then what are they wearing? Her words caused a sudden wave of silence to spread out over the teachers and students alike. Slowly, the male teachers looked at the female ones, most of whom were now blushing and covering their chests and groin areas with their arms, despite the fact they were wearing clothes. The rest were glaring back at the male teachers as if daring them to comment. And we're going, said Ichigo, quickly grabbing Rukia and hurrying past the teachers and into the school. The rest of the day was more or less a normal boring school day, although it took an extra hour and a half for school to start, while all the teachers received their undergarments from the windows. The students were of course constantly giggling at the embarrassed looks on their teachers' faces, or the slap marks on the faces of a few of the male teachers. They're taking it rather well, stated Rukia during lunch. Someone had to know where all of the teachers lived in order to pull this off. Plus they had to break into all their houses. Ichigo just shrugged, too busy eating his sandwich. After gulping it down, he answered. Like I said, it's happened for as long as anyone can remember. I'm talking hundreds of years here, so it's everyone's guess that it's like a family business, except there's no family that's stuck to Karakura that long. But it's just considered normal now, I guess. It happens at least twice a year. Last time they somehow installed popcorn machines to all the cars, and the engine would heat the popcorn. You're driving along when suddenly the bonnet blasts open and popcorn starts flying everywhere. Covered all the streets. Luckily the popcorn always got stuck in the engine, so the car would start to conk out before it happened, so it didn't cause any accidents. Rukia nodded before returning to her meal. After finishing of an apple, she passed her juice carton to Ichigo, who seemingly on instinct alone took it from her, popped the straw in and gave it back. This did not go unnoticed by either Kigo or Mizuru, who were on the roof with them. Ichigo, what was that? Screamed Kigo whilst pointing an accusing finger. Since when were the two of you so in sync? Oh, by the gods, has he corrupted my poor sweet Rukia? No! I will save her from this vile orange barbarian, and with my love heal her pure sweet Inos. He got no further in his speech due to Ichigo's foot slamming rather harshly into his face. When Ichigo removed his foot, it was to reveal Kigo's bruised face and bleeding nose. The teen proceeded to fall backwards, seemingly unconscious. Such an idiot, stated Mizuru in seeming disinterest, as he munched into a salad sandwich. Hey! Shouted Kigo, shooting back onto his feet. Is that any way to refer to your poor and beaten best friend? Mizuru calmly finished his sandwich before stating, "You seem fine to me." And so lunch proceeded thus, with Kigo making an idiot of himself, and Ichigo occasionally putting him down. Soon after school ended, and the group of friends, now including Tatsuki, Oriheim and Chad, left the school. Curiously, all of the teachers were all once again outside, looking at a single window. "Has no one claimed those yet?" asked one of the teachers. The group, wondering what they were talking about, looked up at a window on the right side of the central building to see a set of particularly lacy underwear still waving about outside the window. "So whose is it?" came the voice of a male teacher. "Well, it's not mine." "Mine neither?" "Did anyone not come in today?" "No, everyone's here." "But if it's not any of ours then?" And as one, the entire female teacher population turned their heads to stare at the male teachers. "And we're going," said Ichigo, before racing off, swiftly followed by the rest of his friends. Ichigo and Rukia were now getting ready for bed. Rukia was still thinking about what Ichigo had told her earlier today. "It's been going on for centuries? Could it perhaps be a spirit? But they don't have enough spiritual pressure to manipulate solid objects, so it couldn't be that? A Shinigami? But the Shinigami who are posted here only stay for a decade at the very most before being swapped out. Plus right now I'm the Shinigami representative here. Could it perhaps be a hollow?" Now that was a strange thought. A prank-playing hollow. But if that were the case, surely the Soul Society would have been aware of it. And her beeper didn't go off last night. Almost like it was reading her thoughts, a sudden beeping noise came from her phone. "Ichigo!" she yelled, swiftly yanking her cupboard door open to reveal the orange-haired teen just preparing to put his pajama bottoms on. For a second there was complete silence, before Ichigo quickly put his legs through the little holes and pulled his PJs up. "WW, what are you doing?" stammered Rukia. "Getting dressed," replied Ichigo with a scowl. "Remember, that's why you closed the cupboard door in the first place." "Oh right," replied Rukia before putting her serious face back on. "Look, we don't have time for that right now. A hollow's been detected." The hollow, curiously enough, was located right outside their school. But when they arrived there, they couldn't see any trace of a hollow, although... "Ichigo, all the paint's gone!" exclaimed Rukia loudly and pointing to the now spotless school. "Oh yeah," says Ichigo, noticing what she was pointing to and turning to face the building. "That's the other reason no one cares about the pranks too much. Whatever damage they do is always gone by the next day. People used to stay up and watch out for whoever was behind it to show up, but well, no one ever saw the prankster, not even the security tapes," Ichigo told her, curious himself as to how this prankster achieved this. "Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to spot a ghost, right?" came a voice from behind the two. Both of them quickly turned around, Ichigo's hand already on the handle of his Zanpakuto. His eyes widened in surprise at the sight of what was in front of him. The guy was a hollow. He could feel it. But there didn't really seem to be anything marking him out as such. There was no mask covering his face. The eyes were bright and lively, a deep sapphire blue that spoke of warmth rather than the usual bloodlust he saw in hollows. His skin was tanned and spiky blonde hair fell about his head. On each cheek were 3 whisker marks. His clothes were strange though. He wore a long beige hooded cloak which fell to his ankles, although with the way he was standing his right arm and leg were visible, showing the guy wore fingerless black gloves, with the forearms covered in white tape. He also wore baggy brown bottoms which were tapped around the ankle. He wore no socks, no shoes and no shirt, although there was more tape wrapped around his midsection. Around his neck hung a loose white ring which looked like it was made of bone. The front part of the ring was slightly bigger and formed what looked like a plate, into which a stylized leaf seemed to have been carved and then gone over in black ink. They also noticed a sword that hung from the guy's left hip. The handle was covered in red cloth and the hilt seemed to jut out in several directions. A small chain was attached to the bottom of the sword. He didn't look very old, about 20 at the very most. Rukia frowned. "You're a hollow," she stated rather than asked. Even with her Shinigami powers missing for the most part, she could sense it too. The blonde grinned at her. A wide grin that didn't look right on the face of a hollow. It was friendly, and seemed to lack any malice at all. "Yep," he stated, but offered no more. After waiting a few seconds and getting nothing, Ichigo decided to ask the next question. "Who are you?" finally shouted the blonde, causing both Shinigami to jump a little in anticipation of an attack. But then the blonde began hopping backwards away from them. "I was starting to think you'd never ask." "Very well, since you obviously want to know my true identity so badly, I will tell you." The blonde hopped on one foot and placed a foot in front of him in a stylized kabuki stance. In the sands and forests of Hueco Mundo, I am the one whose name is spoken only in hushed tones and voices filled with awe. Whether you go north, east, south, or west, you have to but merely speak my name to have the men huddled on the ground in fear and the women running and calling my name with lust in their eyes. I am the great artist whose name is known throughout the desert. The prankster god of Hueco Mundo, Naruto Uzumaki. That is my name, believe it! No sooner had he finished, he had to jump back to avoid the oncoming blade of one Ichigo Kurosaki. Hey, watch it, you could poke someone's eye out with that thing, yelled Naruto, shaking his fist at Ichigo. I don't care, you're really annoying, bit back Ichigo, trying to restrain a need to scream. Rukia, what do we do? She frowned, looking Naruto up and down. However human he looks, and however stupid he acts, he is a hollow. Cut him down so that his soul may be cleansed. Ichigo grinned and was about to close in on the blonde when said blonde held his hand up. Hey, wait, let's think about this. If you kill me, I'll go to Soul Society, right? Do you really want me to be running around there? I mean, it's not that I don't want to go. It's always been a dream of mine to prank the head captain, but I'd really rather not be stuck there, you know. Right now I'm free to do my own thing, and I'm loving that. So let's put the giant butter knife down and just have a chat, yeah? Ichigo's eye twitched, hearing how the blonde referred to his sword, but even so he did stop. After all, this guy was somewhat sane. Surely he had a right to decide if he'd prefer to stay as he is. He didn't seem dangerous at the very least. In fact, he seemed kind of harmless. What you'd rather do is not the issue here, commented Rukia. You are a hollow. No matter how idiotic you act, it remains a fact that you have to eat souls in order to continue your existence. We cannot allow that to continue. Ichigo, you must slay him. Ichigo frowned but nodded. Right. Fixing his eyes on the blonde, who now had a scared look on his face, he ran straight forward. Hefting his blade over his head, he brought it down quickly, slashing the blonde in half-length ways. But just as he was about to put away his blade after a job well done, the two halves of the blonde poofed away. Hey, what the hell? Do you just attack every hollow you meet like that? Ichigo could feel his eye twitching from the sound of the annoying voice coming from behind him. As a matter of fact, he said before rocketing off in the direction the voice came from. He brought his sword around with the intention of cutting the blonde's head off, but the boy quickly ducked and the blade skimmed over his head, slicing off a few wisps of hair. Hey, this is criminal. And why is that sword so damn big anyway? This time Ichigo brought the blade crashing straight down. However, unlike last time, the blonde seemed to have no problem dodging as he simply hopped to his left before grinning at Ichigo. You compensating for something? Feeling a level of rage he hadn't felt since he confronted the Grand Fisher, Ichigo grit his teeth and swiped sideways at the blonde with all the strength and speed he could muster. Naruto's response was to jump up and tuck his knees into his chest, before doing a backflip and allowing the blade to pass just under him. But when he landed, "Gah, I can't see anything," came the muffled voice of the blonde. His cloak had come over his head when he did the flip and he was now clawing at it to remove it. Seeing his chance, Ichigo continued his assault and cleaved the hollow in half at the waist. Except once again the two separate pieces just poofed away. Hey, that probably really hurt, you know, screamed Naruto from his position on one of the rooftops. What is with this guy? Grumbled Ichigo, as he got his sword at the ready once again. He is strange, agreed Rukia. He has had several chances to escape now, but he has not even attempted to do so. Yeah, agreed Ichigo. And I thought he was weak, but he's not having any trouble at all dodging me, and he hasn't even drawn his sword yet. But never one to be deterred, Ichigo charged forward again the second he finished talking. He took another swipe at the blonde, who casually flipped over his head, landing on his feet behind Ichigo. Seeing that Ichigo may need some help to land a direct hit on the tricky hollow, Rukia began chanting. O Lord, mask of blood and flesh, all creation, flutter wings, you who bears the name of man, inferno and pandemonium, the sea barrier surges, march on to the south. Hado 31 Shikaho. Rukia fired the blast of red energy at Naruto's feet, who of course jumped into the air. Nowhere to run, hollow, came the voice from behind Naruto. His eyes widened at the sight of Ichigo, his blade over his head and ready to bring it down. This ends now. Ichigo swung his Zanpakuto into Naruto's shoulder with all the strength he could muster. What followed was not the spray of black blood he had come to expect from hollows. Instead, there was a loud cracking sound, and then Ichigo's blade shattered at the point it hit Naruto's shoulder, the top half of the blade clattering to the ground below. Ichigo could only stare in disbelief at the completely unharmed hollow, and the now useless sword in his hand. He had no time at all to react as Naruto flipped in midair and planted a foot into his face, sending him sailing away and crashing through someone's front gate. Naruto landed softly just a few feet away from Rukia. Ah, sorry, he said whilst waving his right hand. I haven't had a fight in a while and I'm a little rusty. I hope I didn't hit him too hard. Grunting and in pain, Ichigo soon got up and hobbled back out into the road, much to Rukia's relief. Ah, that's good, said Naruto, apparently happy about something. Even while it's broken, you're still keeping hold of your blade. He gestured to the Zanpakuto that Ichigo was still holding. No worries though. Your Zanpakuto is still sealed, so it'll regenerate eventually. Faster if you pack some Raisure into it. You seem rather well versed in the function of a Zanpakuto, commented Rukia from the side with what sounded like worry in her voice. Well duh, replied Naruto. After all, I've got one too, see. He waved his sword, still in its orange scabbard. In response, Rukia let out a gasp. That's a Zanpakuto! She gasped at the realization. Yep, chirped the blonde happily. Proper one too. Most Erensos don't get that, they just get special swords that hold all their powers. But mine's a true and through Zanpakuto. Lazy gets almost always asleep though. I wonder if having a proper Zanpakuto means I'm not an Erenser? Maybe I should think up a different name for a species I can be? Rukia wasn't really listening though. How could a hollow have a Zanpakuto? It didn't make any sense. And that other word he said? Arankars. He made it sound like they all have Zanpakutos. But what could that mean? Hello, you in there? Hey shorty, listen to me. Rukia's head snapped up faster than either of the present males could kick Naruto between the legs. Which, as she was about to find out, was a mistake. Oh! She screamed before taking her leg back and hopping around on one foot whilst massaging her other now bruised one. Yeah, see, that's not a good idea. Thanks to my hero, I literally have balls of steel, explained the blonde hollow, apparently not at all bothered by Rukia's attempt to inflict intense physical agony. But then Ichigo had been trying to kill him, and he didn't seem too bothered by that either. Hey, get away from Rukia! Cried Ichigo, as he hobbled over and placed himself between Rukia and Naruto. Naruto frowned. You know, you two or I've been nothing but nice to you, answered all your questions, and in return you've tried to kill me and prevent me from having kids in the future. If I can have kids. Which, being a ghost, I really don't know about. Anyway, point is, I was hoping we could be friends, but with friends like you I wouldn't need enemies. So later. I'm out of here. And like that the blonde was gone. Simply disappeared into thin air, leaving a blinking Ichigo who was wondering what the hell just happened and a tearful Rukia who was still nursing her foot. Bo ha 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 ha. Ichigo's eyebrow twitched. He could literally not believe this. This stupid laugh that had been following him everywhere. This laugh that he thought he could at least escape while he was hunting hollows. But no, apparently even among the hollows Don Kannoji had fans. Spirits are always with you, cried the blonde hollow in front of him. Ichigo was slowly drawing the sword from his back, hoping not to spook the hollow before he cleaved it in two. Alas, it was not to be. Hey, what are you drawing your sword for? I thought you would have figured it out by now. You can't cut me. Ichigo growled. His sword had only just reformed after Rukia had taught him how to fix it. He'd been fighting with half a blade for the last week. And just when it was finally fixed, the blonde hollow had popped up in front of him again. Even worse, it was doing Don Kannoji's evil laugh thing. He was even doing the pose. Look, if there's nothing you want, then leave. I'm not in the mood to deal with you, grunted Ichigo. Well, yes, actually there is. You see, I was not aware when I made that last prank that we would be getting a celebrity coming to this town. Obviously I jumped the gun and I don't have enough time to plan and make another elaborate prank. Therefore I'm going to need your help, said Naruto proudly, a hand on his hip and a finger pointing at Ichigo. This actually allowed Ichigo to see what Naruto looked like under the cloak. Of course, Ichigo had no real interest in the male body, but he couldn't help but notice the scars that seemed to litter Naruto. The thing was, they were scars which looked like they had healed much better than they should have. They were more like pale blotches of skin than scars. But the strange thing was Naruto's hollow hole. It was on the right side of Naruto's chest rather than in the center like most hollows. But on top of that there were pale lines that seemed to flicker around the hole like flickering lightning. He had a feeling that hollow hole was running straight through a rather large scar on his chest. Well, at least I know he's definitely a hollow, he thought. Look, I've got better stuff to do than help you play pranks. Go and bother someone else. Naruto frowned. I don't say that. The only other people I can bother is that girl you were with and your little sister. Suddenly Ichigo's sword was at his throat. How do you know about Karen? Snarled Ichigo, his eyes narrowed and ready to kill. But Naruto just hopped away from the blade and threw his arms out to the side, his palms facing upwards and flicking his cloak upwards at the same time. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the prankster god of Hueco Mundo. I know everything. Ichigo could feel his rage reaching new heights. Just answer the question. Naruto dropped his arms, but his smile never wavered. His smile really bothered Ichigo. A smile like that just didn't belong on a hollow. It was like Yuzu's. Warm and friendly but bigger. She's one of the only people in this town who can hear me. So I've spoke to her once or twice. I don't think she's realized I'm a ghost though. Just a weirdo who bothers her occasionally. Ichigo just scowled at him. Stay away from my sister, he warned. But I can talk to her, pouted Naruto. You're no fun. Ichigo didn't reply, but he did put his sword away. How long have you been here? He asked, genuinely curious. After all his pranks have been reported for centuries. Of course he should have guessed an immortal monster in human form was behind it. About 5 minutes, why? Asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. I didn't mean the park. I meant Karakura, responded Ichigo with his trademark scowl. Naruto put a finger on his lip and pulled it down a bit. Ichigo guessed it was his thinking pose. I dunno. I was born here like, a long time ago. Hueco Mundo's really boring and there's no one fun to prank there, so I come here 2 or 3 times a year to see how everything's changed. It was really weird at first. I came here and most of the forests were gone. And then people started fighting again. They were killing each other, and eventually castles and stuff were built. And then the castles were torn down, and they started building roads and stuff. But people are a lot weaker now than they used to be. When I was alive, hollows couldn't do much to living souls because they were too strong. There were occasional reports of people getting torn up by invisible monsters. But back then things like that weren't that rare, so a lot of people knew how to fight them and didn't think much of it. Ichigo was actually listening with rapt attention. This hollow was alive before everything. Before Japanese history was recorded. That's like at least 2,000 years old. And he'd been here ever since. So you're like super old then, said Ichigo. Explains how you're so strong, I guess. Naruto nodded, his happy expression back on his face. Yup. So then are you going to help me with that prank? How about we discuss it over a bowl of ramen? Ichigo blanched. Hollows eat ramen? Naruto shrugged. Dunno, but I do. They didn't get any further though because a wave of blue energy crashed into Naruto from behind. He was sent hurtling across the park they were in, his face digging into the ground. Ichigo, what are you doing? Came Rukia's voice as she hurried over to him. She stopped in front of him, panting lightly. What's going on? Did he attack you? Ichigo frowned at her. No, he did that annoying laugh you and everyone else in the class have been doing all week, then invited me to eat ramen. Rukia raised an eyebrow. Hollows can't eat ramen. Hey, what was that for you, violent shorty? Screamed Naruto, suddenly popping up in front of her. Rukia acted on instinct and punched him in the face. Just popping up like that reminded her way too much of Ishin. However, she had completely forgotten about Naruto's iron skin. Oh! Cried Rukia, retracting her hand. Naruto blinked. Then he jumped up triumphantly. Yeez! Violent girls, I fear you no longer. My anti-violent girl skin cannot be beaten by your tiny fists. Rukia glared at him, blinking back a few tears from the pain in her hand. Then she held her hands in front of her. Scattered beast bones. Spire, crimson crystal, steel wheels. The wind if it moves, the sky if it stops. The tone of the spear striking fills the lone castle. Header number 63. Reikuhu. A blot of yellow lightning flew from Rukia's fingertips and shot straight into Naruto's face. He barely had enough time to be surprised before he was sent backwards, flipping over himself. The attack hadn't pierced his skin, but it did still pack a punch. Ichigo probably would have found this amusing if Rukia hadn't have collapsed straight afterwards. Rukia, are you alright? He asked worriedly. Rukia nodded. That attack's still too much for me. That blow didn't even contain 10% of the power it should have. Ichigo's eyes flickered over to Naruto, who was only now getting up. That was less than 1/10 of the full power? He sure as hell hoped she never tried to use it on him after she regained her powers. He looked up to notice Naruto was once again next to them. You know what, Mr. Shinigami? I'll just leave you and your girlfriend alone. I think she was getting jealous. Later. Before Ichigo could yell at him, Naruto was gone again. Damn it, how does he do that? To Ichigo's absolute horror, he was forced to go along to Don Kannoji's event along with his family. And also to his horror, Don Kannoji got into a fight with Naruto. Don Kannoji could actually see ghosts, which meant he could see the ghost that was bound to the hospital. Sadly, he didn't have a clue about how to exorcise a ghost, and was trying to wrench off the chain in the bound soul's chest. Ichigo was doing his best to intervene, even with everyone trying to hold him back, when he heard a sudden cry. Dynamic entry. Naruto came out of nowhere and drop-kicked Kannoji in the face, sending him flying into the crowd. And then Naruto noticed the camera. Oh, I know what that does. I wonder if anyone can see me? Yahoo, I'm here, the great Naruto Uzumaki, prankster god of Hueco Mundo. Feast your eyes, world, on the greatness that is me. What the? It's that weird guy. What the hell's he doing? Came Karen's voice from somewhere beside Ichigo. Hey you, what are you doing interfering, Sonny? Shouted Don Kannoji in his loud booming voice. Ooh, what's this? Don Kannoji just seemed to get attacked by a mysterious force. Came the voice of the commentator. What mysterious force? He just got drop-kicked by Naruto, commented Karen dryly. Oh, I see how it is. You're a ghost, I see. I couldn't tell straight away, since you look remarkably solid. I see you must be here to protect the other mean spirit. Mean spirit? Asked Naruto in confusion. You mean this guy? Does he look like a hollow to you? No, and if a guy's screaming, then that obviously means that whatever you're doing hurts. Oh, I see, it seems we have a misunderstanding. Bo ha 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 ha, replied Don Kannoji. I was just helping that spirit to pass on to the next life. Wait in line, boy, I'll help you out next. But Naruto frowned. Your method seems to include ripping out a soul's emotions by yanking their chains off. Do you see a chain on me? No, so obviously that's not going to work. And passing on is supposed to be a peaceful experience, not a painful one. If you're making them scream, then you're obviously doing it wrong. What are you, an idiot? Wait, don't answer that, I can tell by how you dress. Ichigo actually let out a sigh of relief. Looks like the hollow was actually going to help them. And besides that, I prepared a big prank for you inside the hospital. So if you want to carry on torturing this spirit, you're going to have to come get him. And with that, Naruto threw the spirit over his shoulder and jumped all the way to the second-floor window, disappearing inside the hospital. Ichigo, Rukia called after him. You have to go and help. That hollow could eat the spirit's soul, you have to save it. Somehow Ichigo seriously doubted that Naruto would do that. But he couldn't take the chance. Right. Question was, he needed a way to separate his soul from his body. Maybe I could be of assistance. What? Asked Ichigo before the butt of a walking stick poked his head, and his soul separated from his body and fell forwards. The guards who had been holding Ichigo back were shocked when the boy suddenly collapsed. Ichigo looked back to see Urahara standing there grinning at him. Hat and clogs, he gasped in surprise. Don't stand there gasping, Ichigo. Go save that plus, said Urahara with a grin and a shooing gesture. Ichigo nodded before turning around and running after Don Kannoji into the hospital. Inside was not what Ichigo had been expecting. He was lucky that Don Kannoji went in first. It let him avoid the bucket of slime and oil that had been perched above the door, as well as the skate the Don Kannoji had fallen onto, and carried him to the end of the corridor and dumped him into a pile of hay covered in feathers. Wow, he wasn't kidding, said Ichigo out loud. This allowed Don Kannoji to notice him for the first time. His head pumped up from inside the pile of hay. The glasses seemed to have saved his eyesight, since none of the oil and stuff had gotten into his eyes. Ooh, who are you? Another spirit? Wait there, and I will help you to pass on as well, he boomed. I'm not a spirit, I'm a Shinigami, replied Ichigo in an annoyed voice. Yeah, okay kid, whatever you say. You just wait there and I'll be right back as soon as I've saved that poor spirit. Don Kannoji quickly extracted himself from the pile, taking no notice of the hay and feathers that were covering him. He raced around another corner. A moment later there was a yell indicating that he'd set of another trap. Ichigo just gave a sigh and followed. By the time they got to the roof where Naruto was waiting, Don Kannoji had managed to set of just about every single trap Naruto had set up on the way there. As well as hay and feathers, Don Kannoji had been forced to lose his jacket and hat, as well as his glasses after the hat was set on fire. The jacket was shredded and the glasses were covered in feathers. Ichigo was just amazed at how none of the seemingly lethal traps were actually lethal. Finally, the pair stood in front of Naruto, who was playing cards with the spirit he kidnapped. Goldfish! Cried Naruto happily. The spirit's eyebrows trembled and he gritted his teeth. It's go fish and we're playing poker. Oh, said Naruto, scratching his head, before crying out just as cheerfully, poker. The spirit just sighed. Just show me your hand, he said. Naruto did, revealing 4 kings and an ace. God damn it! Shouted the spirit, throwing his cards away, crossing his arms and pouting. Ichigo had to take a moment to get over the sheer stupidity he just witnessed. Kanoji did not. There you are, evil spirit. I, Don Kanoji, challenge you to combat. And upon my victory you will allow me send both yourself and your companion on to the next life. Very well then, shouted Naruto as he stood up, placing closed fists on his hips. If you can defeat me I will repent my evil ways and release my hostage over to you. But if you cannot then you must pay for my ramen for the rest of the month. BWA ha 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 ha. Apparently Naruto had decided to not try to convince Don Kanoji any further, and was now quite content to play the villain. Then a certain thought occurred to Ichigo. Wait a second, how do you get your ramen normally? You're a ghost so the store owners can't see you. Replied Naruto while scratching his head. I just nag your sister till she buys it for me. Before that I'd nag your mother. Can't remember what I did before that though. Ichigo's breath itched. This hollow knew his mother. And what's more, his mother could see ghosts. Well, that explains where he got it from. He certainly didn't get it from old goat face. Well then come heroes, let us do battle, said Naruto enthusiastically, whilst making a come-hither motion with his hand. While Ichigo was trying to think when exactly he'd agreed to fight, Don Kanoji charged forward. I'll finish you off in one blow, howled Kanoji as he went to spear the hollow with his staff. But then he stopped. Okay, so where's your chain and hole? Ichigo actually face-faulted. Naruto however just grinned and shifted his arm in a grand gesture. This caused his cloak to fly to the side, revealing his hollow hole on the right side of his chest. What? Cried Don Kanoji, adopting a panic pose with his hands on his cheeks and his legs bent at the knees. Your chain's already gone, so why haven't you passed on? Ha ha. You rhymed, I like that. And as for your question, well, maybe I'll tell you when you're buying me my ramen. Naruto started to charge at Don Kanoji, who got back into a battle-ready position. Seeing that he might as well join in, Ichigo ran straight past Kanoji to meet with the charging Naruto. Hey kid, what you doing? This is my show, cried Kanoji. He actually pointed to the helicopter that was in the air filming, which Ichigo had somehow managed to completely miss. Right you are, chirped Naruto. Then he did the last thing Ichigo was expecting. He grabbed his sword and held it down so it was horizontal between them. Then he thrust it forward, digging the pommel of Ichigo's blase into his stomach. Ichigo was practically knocked off his feet, but he didn't let go of his blade. But then neither did Naruto, who swung it with Ichigo still hanging on, throwing both Ichigo and his sword of the hospital roof. Ichigo managed to regain his footing in midair, skidding on the erasure he'd managed to gather at his feet to stay in the air. Ichigo honestly had no idea how he does this, it was just something instinctual. Naruto took this opportunity to attack Kanoji himself. Here I come, he yelled happily before jumping high into the air. He came down heading straight at Kanoji. His legs were bent and he obviously intended to land on the man. Kanoji dived to the side as Naruto landed, the force of his impact causing cracks to appear along the roof. Ichigo used this time to get back in the fight. He darted towards Naruto and swung his blade across, hoping to cut the blonde in two. But at the last second another Naruto seemed to appear out of nowhere and pull the first Naruto to the floor, allowing Ichigo's blade to fly harmlessly overhead. If that wasn't enough, Naruto kicked his back legs out, plowing them into Ichigo's stomach and sending the poor boy flying off the hospital roof once again. Damn it, this means spirit's really strong, shouted Don Kanoji, no doubt so that the cameraman could somehow hear him over the sound of the helicopter's rotating blades. I think I'll have to resort to my special technique. Naruto stood up fully alert when he heard Kanoji say this. Genuinely curious as to what he was going to do, he dismissed the clone next to him with a poof and waited for Kanoji to move. Ha ha ha, Kanoji chanted, both his palms facing towards Naruto. Take this, special cannon. 2 small flickering balls of light appeared in each hand. With a flick of his wrist he sent them flying towards Naruto at an incredibly slow speed. Both Naruto and Ichigo, who had returned to the roof after hearing Kanoji's yelling, watched in fascination as the 2 flickering balls of light slowly approached Naruto. And then it began to drop, going lower and lower until the first one hit the ground right next to Naruto's right foot. There was a small explosion that blasted bits of rock into Naruto's face. And then a second explosion. When the smoke cleared, Naruto's foot was revealed to have fallen into a newly created hole in the roof, and he was having a bit of trouble getting it out. "Chance!" screamed Kanoji. He darted forwards with his staff held next to his head like a baseball player would hold his bat, and then as he approached Naruto he swung, cracking the staff over Naruto's head. Literally. Don Kanoji eyed his staff with a small sense of wonder, before looking over at Ichigo. "Quick, ghostly swordsman. I have created an opening, finish him off with your giant blade." Ichigo felt his eye twitch, but before he could even move to attempt what Kanoji had suggested, Naruto removed his foot from the hole with seemingly no problem at all, and slammed his heel into Kanoji's stomach, knocking the man away. Then he jumped backwards and attempted an overhead kick on Ichigo, which Ichigo blocked with his sword. Things did not end there, as Naruto brought another foot crashing down towards Ichigo. A sudden image of his sword being shattered again appeared in Ichigo's mind, causing him to wisely move out of the way of the attack rather than try and block it like the last one. Naruto's attack missed, and he was off balance. Ichigo decided to take the opportunity to smack Naruto over the head with his sword, but the blonde had already vanished from sight when he attempted it. It was through instinct alone that he brought his blade to his side in time to defend from another vicious kick Naruto had sent at him. The force was still enough to send him skidding back along the roof though. He seems to rely on his legs rather than his arms, thought Ichigo, before the blonde hollow was back on him, and he was forced to dodge another kick. He decided to play it safe for now and attack when he had an opening. Naruto was having fun. Ichigo and the mustache guy were fun to play with. The orange Shinigami had never introduced himself, or if he did then Naruto wasn't paying attention at the time, but with him and his short girlfriend screaming each other's name all the time it wasn't hard to figure out. Plus he knew the names of every one of the Kurosaki family anyway. Of course he was holding back against Ichigo. He was a lot stronger than he was letting on, so he decided for now he'd stick to his legs when attacking Ichigo. If he was to start punching at him as well he might accidentally kill the kid, and he didn't want that. Ichigo gave a roar as he charged at Naruto once again, bringing his blade down in an overhead swing. Naruto dodged, hoped, to the side, allowing the sword to swing through the place he was just occupying, embedding the sword deeply into the roof. "Damn it," muttered Ichigo as he tried to pull the sword out of the roof, only to be forced to duck and then let go of his sword as Naruto's foot swung through the air where his face had just been, and then he brought a heel down where Ichigo's wrist was. Since Ichigo moved out of the way, the heel instead plowed straight into the ground, causing tiles to crack underneath it, and by extension of that releasing Ichigo's Zanpakuto from its confinement. "Well, would you look at that," said Naruto happily as he bent down and picked up the large sword, before swinging it around in front of him as if it weighed next to nothing. "Well, Ichigo, I think it's time I taught you why it's not a good idea to try and randomly kill hollows with your sword. They might just try and kill you right back." Wasting no more words, Naruto ran forward towards Ichigo, holding the sword over his head like an angry villager does a pitchfork while screaming with a childish joy. Ichigo's face paled as he watched the hollow charge at him, clearing the space between them at a rather high speed. Ichigo dived to the side just as Naruto ran right past him. "Oh crap," muttered Ichigo as he realized that Naruto's target was actually Don Kanoji. The man let out an eep before scrabbling to his feet. He started charging another one of his special cannons, although he looked very tired now, and was obviously approaching his limit. He stopped though when Ichigo's sword was suddenly hurled at him, burying itself into the ground in front of Don Kanoji, and causing the man to let out a terrified yell before falling back on his ass. Naruto wasn't done though. He appeared out of thin air directly in front of Kanoji, and shoved the man onto his back with his foot. Don Kanoji hit the ground with an oof, before Naruto appeared bending over him with a foot planted on his throat. He gave Kanoji a dazzling grin. "You lose. How about we get that ramen now?" Ichigo gave a sigh before going to select his sword. It had been put pretty firmly into the ground, and it took a good few yanks on Ichigo's part to retrieve it. Don Kanoji noticed Ichigo reclaim his blade and waited with bated breath for him to launch a sneak attack on Naruto and get the cheery blonde of him. But Ichigo did no such thing. Instead he strode over to the now forgotten earth-bound spirit, and before it could protest he tapped the hilt of his Zanpakuto of his head. Kanoji watched in silence as the spirit glowed brightly before disappearing altogether, leaving nothing but a dark butterfly behind. "Actually, you lose, Naruto. I saved the spirit. Since that was my objective from the start, that means I win." Naruto looked over at him with his mouth wide open as if he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. If he didn't win, then that meant... "But my ramen?" he cried, actual tears appearing in his eyes. "Get your own," growled Ichigo. Naruto gave a huff but nonetheless relented, removing his foot from Kanoji's throat, allowing the man to get up. The second he was up, Naruto dropped his gloomy disposition and adopted his usual wide grin. "Fine then, Strawberry, I will admit defeat for today. But beware, for I will return. NWA ha 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 ha. Through his speech, Naruto had begun taking on various bad guy poses, making use of his cloak to add to effect. Well, by strawberry mustachio. And with that, Naruto seemed to ump backwards but disappeared mid-jump, leaving not a single trace of him behind. God, that guy's annoying, stated Ichigo, before looking over to Don Kanoji. Me and you need to have a little chat about your purification methods. Naruto cackled as he watched the results of his latest prank. He did smaller pranks in between his bigger ones just to keep things lively. Of course, he made sure to put his usual insignia in the form of a sticker just above the target's door. Today's prank was a simple but effective one, which involved a trip wire and a paddling pool of blue paint. The night before, he'd hidden out in the house of a family who were watching Smurfs. The perks of being invisible. Free movies, free peep shows, pretty much free everything. Except ramen. He refused to steal ramen. That would just piss of the gods. Anyway, the Smurf film had given some major inspiration, and as expected, the unsuspecting homeowner tripped over the wire the second he stepped from his house and landed in a paddling pool of blue paint. Naruto cackled away merrily at the sight of the sputtering owner who was floundering around in the paint, having momentarily forgotten he could stand up, until Naruto stopped suddenly. His body went rigged like a corpse, his eyes widened and his pupils dilated. A shiver started at his ankles and started working its way up the rest of him until even the individual strands of his hair were shivering. He didn't even notice the loud roars and cries of hollows that were suddenly pouring into Karakura town. The only thing he could fathom was the smell. A smell so strong it hit his senses like a bulldozer, and all of a sudden he found his mouth watering. Without a word, he dropped from the tree and shot down the road, following his nose towards the smell. Damned! Yelled Ichigo as he cut through yet another hollow. I'm going to kick that bastard Uria's ass. He didn't have time to continue his monologue though, as he had to dodge a swipe from a hollow that had snuck up behind him before spinning around and swiping his oversized Zanpakuto through the hollow's mask. Karen should be getting out of school right now. I can't let her get caught up in all this. He let out a war cry as he charged another hollow, fully aware of another 5 who had appeared on the rooftops around him. Boom! The sound of the impact of Chad's fist connecting with the hollow could actually be heard by the living 5 blocks away as the monster was sent flying backwards, crashing to the ground in a cloud of dust. Chad stood with his now armored fist stretched out before him. Hey big guy, called Ichigo's little sister Karen from behind him. What happened to your arm? He was prevented from answering though when a large guttural roar interrupted him, causing both Chad and Karen to look over at the hollow that Chad had just nailed. It was getting up, albeit with a missing arm. It's still not, muttered Karen in disbelief. The hollow started to charge at them, its large powerful legs letting it move with a speed you wouldn't suspect considering his size. Chad gave a grunt and started charging as well. But he never got past starting. Get the hell out the way, came a voice to the right of them. This caused all 3 of them, hollow included, to look to their right, just in time to see a boy with a blonde mop of hair and wearing a brown cloak to come charging down at them with the hollow directly in his path. Move! The boy gave no other warning before leaping into the air and rocketing at the hollow with his foot extended out in front of him. He didn't even slow down when he made contact with the hollow's head exploding into a shower of blood as the blonde plowed through. He landed on his feet and shot off again, leaving a dissolving hollow in his wake. Was that Naruto? Asked Karen in disbelief. Chad just shrugged. Ishida was starting to get worried. There were 2 reasons for this. The first was that he was starting to run on empty. His fingers were starting to bleed, and some of the hollows were starting to take multiple arrows to take them down. He'd almost failed to save 3 people. The second reason was the ridiculously strong hollow that he could feel running around seemingly randomly. But it was going in his general direction. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, he muttered to himself as he let off another arrow, watching it pierce the mask of a rhino-shaped hollow but failing to kill it. Orihime was unnaturally calm about seeing the 6 fairies dancing around in front of her. But hey, she'd seen stranger things. In her head mostly, but still. Plus there was a huge octopus squid thingy staring her down. However, she decided that these fairies needed some kind of direction. Fairies, flying fairies are talking to me, she cried, throwing her arms up in some weird manner. One of the fairies seemed to approve of this. Nice reaction, very nice, she said approvingly. But you're wrong, we're not fairies. Yes you are, thought Orihime. We are the power of your soul. Awakened by something you responded to. We are. Clap. Hey! Screamed the fairy, trapped between Orihime's clapped hands. Just because you didn't get the explanation doesn't mean you have to capture me. No one can see us anyway. Oriheim paused for a moment. Really? She asked in a disappointed tone. Really? The fairy shouted back. What were you planning on taking us to show and tell? Then the fairy seemed to pause and think back on her previous statement. Although a few people like Ichigo Kurosaki might be able to see us. Ichigo? Why? You know why, answered the fairy mysteriously. Because we were born because of him. Huh? Any more of the conversation was interrupted by a different fairy dressed in a black jumpsuit and white scarf covering the lower half of her face. There's no time for introductions, he yelled. All you really need to know, woman, is how to use us. He's small, but bossy, thought Oriheim. Now the other fairies decided to butt in. Our job is to shield and reject, they shouted. And to activate us you need to use your heart and Kodadama, or spirit chant. Of course, this just served to further confuse Oriheim. Meanwhile, the hollow was preparing to strike. It was just about to launch its attack when a voice made itself known. Move it, move it, move it, move it, move it! This attracting the attention of everyone present when they turned to saw a blond boy in a brown cloak hurtling towards them. Apparently the hollow was in his way and he was not willing to divert his course. Proven when rather than going around the hollow he spun when he reached her and landed a roundhouse kick straight to its mask, destroying it and sending the hollow flying. It had already half disintegrated before crashing into a building. The blonde meanwhile didn't even slow down. Oriheim and her fairies just watched as the boy continued running, eventually disappearing from sight. Well, okay then, said the black-clad fairy, his shoulders slumping. The original fairy came back over to Oriheim. How about we just teach you how to heal Tatsuki for now? She asked. Really, yay. Damn it, there are too many hollows. My strength is beginning to fade, muttered Ishida under his breath. Plus that really strong signature was getting closer and closer. He began moving, seeking out more hollows and ignoring the pain in his fingers. He eventually came upon Rukia failing to destroy a hollow with her Kido. He gave deep breath before prepping his bow again and firing a volley of arrows into the hollow. Rukia turned around to face him, while he lowered his bow. I suppose I should say, nice to meet you. This is the first time we've spoken one-on-one, Rukia Kichiki. Ichigo was not expecting to find Yuryu with Rukia and Kan, but hey, it saved him some time. I finally found you, Yuryu, said Ichigo, attracting everyone's attention. I'd love to make you cry right now, but first I got to pulverize this guy. Ichigo reached out and grabbed hold of Kan. Kan, where have you been? Ichigo roared, his head seeming to grow 3 sizes as he yelled. What are you getting mad at me for? Save me for after you beat up him, Kan yelled back, pointing to a flabbergasted Ishida. Shut up, I had to run all over town because you didn't bring Rukia's thingamajig. You should be happy. Running's a great way to relieve stress. I don't have any stress. Then why are you always throwing? Didn't you dedicate your mind, body and soul to Rukia? You should be able to find her easy in that case, right? I did. I could find her just by her smell. HY, cried Rukia, I do not smell. That's enough, I am your enemy. This is no time for bickering, said Ishida. I never said it was a bad smell. It's a heavenly smell, see? Sniff, sniff. Fool, stop. Hey, stop or I'll. Thwack. My nose, I think she broke my nose. Hey Rukia, that's my body, think before you punch. Said Ishida, trying to get attention. Don't yell at her, Ichigo, it's my fault. If you want to hit someone, hit me. Thwack. Sheesh, I didn't mean it. Then you shouldn't have said it. That's enough, Ichigo Kurosaki, I am your opponent, roared Ishida before firing off an arrow. But Ichigo blocked it with ease. He's fast, thought Ishida. You're right, this is between you and me, answered Ichigo. So stop with the contest. You and me, let's go right here. Crack. Ishida stiffened as Ichigo continued to yell at him. Rukia and Kan though noticed the same thing Ishida did. There was a giant crack in the sky, and the hollows were heading right for it. Time skip. Things had gone downhill. Rukia had told Ichigo about the Quincy's, but it turns out Ishida was more upset about the death of his grandfather. Ichigo had then solved Ishida's problem using the only method that had been proved to work for any problem. By punching it. It was after that though that the problem started. Or rather the problem, singular. But this problem just happened to be the size of a skyscraper. The problem's name was Minos Grande. Rukia was in shock as she saw the giant creature lumbering through the crack in the sky, and a feeling of hopelessness began to settle in the pit of her stomach. How are we supposed to fight that? Whispered Ishida, as a bead of sweat worked its way down his face. Hee hee. Ishida heard Ichigo's laughter and turned to face him. What's so funny? It's pointless to think about how to fight that thing, answered Ichigo to Ishida's confusion. To beat that guy we just have to cut and cut some more. Come on you. And without another word Ichigo sped over, leaving a completely dumbstruck Ishida behind. Ichigo managed to nick its ankle before he was toe-bunted away. Are you alright, Ichigo? Asked Ishida, uncertain if he should feel concerned for his rival or not. Well, what do you know, I'm actually not dead, answered Ichigo as he stood up and sooted himself off, completely oblivious to the blood leaking from his skull. What the hell were you thinking? How did you expect to beat it like that? Yelled Ishida when he figured out that Ichigo was more or less fine. Well, I figured if I started cutting at his feet I'd eventually get to his head, answered Ichigo. Were you dropped on your head as a child? Get up, we need a new plan, barked out Ishida as he grabbed onto Ichigo's sword. He was not expecting his bout to triple in size the second he grabbed the thing though. This eventually led to Rukia trying to hold in her sniggers of laughter, as Ichigo had his sword tied to Ishida's head in order to supercharge his bow. This is stupid, remarked Ichigo. Hey, I'm not happy that I have to team up with a Shinigami either. While they were distracted arguing, and separating their weapons so they could argue, the Minos began to charge something, and it started off small but soon red flecks of energy began to gravitate towards his mouth, forming a dark crimson orb. Rukia noticed this and her eyes widened in fear. Asiro, she said in disbelief. You too, move it! Now noticing the attack, Ishida began to instruct Ichigo to put the sword back, not noticing the orange-haired Shinigami had already run off. The Minos discharged the Asiro, and Ichigo brought up his blade. The beam hit the blade but Ichigo didn't budge. This continued for a while, Ichigo not budging an inch as the beam continued hammering away at him with extreme force. Ishida could barely believe what he was seeing. If Ichigo's energy is always on full, he thought, thinking back to their earlier argument and Ichigo's revelation that he never controls his spirit energy, then if he were to ever block it off, then the energy would build up. And if he were to release that energy. Ichigo gave a roar before swinging his blase upwards. The result was instantaneous. He cut straight through the beam, reducing it to particles of energy before continuing on and cutting straight into the giant from its hip to its shoulder. The cut didn't go straight through, but it was pretty deep, and black blood began spraying from the wound, drenching the area directly in front of them. Oh, gross, muttered Ichigo, trying to wipe off the blood. The creature gave a loud groan that rattled the surrounding rooftops and gained the attention of everyone present. It began moving backwards into the giant portal it had opened in the sky. Ishida couldn't believe it. The Minos was running away. But then he remembered something else. Another hollow signature in the area. The one that had been running around earlier. It was here. Back the fuck away from my ramen databio. While Ishida, Ichigo, and Rukia were left reeling from the loud statement that was just made, a blonde in brown rags suddenly appeared out of nowhere, at face level with the Minos. He brought his hand back and a blue orb spiraled into existence in his palm. He slammed the orb forwards into the Minos just below his mask, the orb burying itself deep into the creature. There was a second where nothing happened, but then the Minos let out a roar as a large crater appeared on the monster from the point of impact, groove marks appearing in a spiral formation inside the crater. The bottom half of the Minos mask disintegrated inside of the crater, and the giant Minos, after giving one last roar of pain, began to fall backwards through the hole in the sky and out of sight. Whether it survived the attack or not, nobody knew. The blonde seemed to be propelled backwards after he launched his attack, and landed in front of the group. Naruto, for that's who the blonde obviously was, turned to face them all with a large grin plastered on his face, before it suddenly turned into one full of determination as he pointed an accusing finger at Ishida. You, where's my ramen? Ishida let his jaw drop. This was a hollow, right? It felt like a hollow, but don't try to hide it from me, I can smell it. Hell, I can feel it, like the air has been saturated with the most heavenly smelling ramen I have ever felt/smelt. Ishida of course had no clue what Naruto was talking about, but Rukia had come up with a theory. Is he talking about the hollow bait? She whispered to herself, just loud enough for the other two to hear. Hollow bait does not smell like ramen, Ishida said, pushing his glasses further up his nose. Not to a normal hollow, but you never know with this guy, answered Rukia. He seems to mention ramen each time we bump into him. If hollow bait feels and smells different for each hollow depending on their own preferred taste, then it may actually smell like ramen to him. Ishida frowned. Hollows don't eat ramen, he said. This one does, countered Ichigo. My sister buys it for him sometimes. Which reminds me, this guy owes my sister like a bucket full of yen. Karen said he eats like 30 bowls a sitting. Hey look, said Naruto impatiently from where was standing, arms crossed and tapping his foot of the floor. I can hear you guys talking and all, but I ain't seeing no ramen. So how about you bring it out, or I beat it out of you? Ichigo stepped forward. Let me deal with this. Karen said you have to be sensitive with him when it comes to ramen. He stepped closer to Naruto, who had stopped tapping his foot and was waiting patiently to hear what Ichigo had to say. Hey shithead. We ain't got no ramen. And you ain't getting any till you pay my little sister back for every single bowl she brought you. Which according to her numbers in the hundreds. Rukia and Ishida were slack-jawed. This was what he considered sensitive. Suddenly they all heard a grinding noise. It took them a moment to realize it was coming from Naruto. He was grinding his teeth together. No ramen, he muttered, his hair shadowing his eyes. You're telling me there's no ramen? Ichigo took a step back. He could feel Naruto's killing intent rising. Maybe he hadn't handled that properly. Don't lie to me, Dadabio. I can smell it. Ichigo didn't even have enough time to blink before Naruto's fist slammed into his face. Ichigo had just enough time to realize that this was the first time that Naruto had used his hands in a fight before his head smashed into the ground. Ichigo, Rukia called out. She'd seen him hit the ground and she knew he'd be feeling that for a while. Ishida had a far more practical response, readying his bow and docking an arrow. He never got a chance to fire it though since Naruto's fist was suddenly buried in his stomach. You, hissed Naruto, his eyes practically trying to glare Ishida to death. You're the one with the ramen. Ishida's only response was to cough up some blood. Bakudo number 4, Heinawa. Rukia yelled, calling up yellow ropes to try and bind Naruto. But he moved and she ended up binding Ishida instead, who stumbled and fell down to the ground. She heard the crack as his glasses broke. She also felt a tug as Naruto appeared behind her, grabbing her by her collar and throwing her over to Ichigo, who caught her. What's going on? He asked her as he set her down on her feet. He's not normally this violent. I think it's the hollow bait, answered Rukia warily as she watched Naruto go back to tormenting Ishida. It's making him act strange. A white blur shot past her, which turned out to be Ishida. Naruto had thrown him like a missile straight at Ichigo, taking him down. Ichigo growled as he got up, hoisting Ishida to his feet as well. Damn it, Ishida, you've doomed us all. Ishida didn't respond. He was too busy jumping out the way as Naruto rammed into Ichigo. Give me my ramen! He roared like a madman. He grabbed Ichigo's head and smashed him into the ground. Then he pulled Ichigo back by his collar and pulled his fist back. Damn it, he's too strong, thought Ichigo, as he watched Naruto rear back a fist. It was glowing with an eerie red color. Somehow he could just tell that this was going to hurt a lot. Is this really how I go? After everything I've been through, everything I've sworn to protect, am I really going to get killed by Naruto in a ramen rage? Naruto's fist descended. Naruto, you big idiot! And then it stopped about 2 inches from Ichigo's face. Both boys turned to their right to spot Ichigo's savior. His eyes widened exponentially when he spotted his little sister Karen. But that wasn't all. She was carrying 5 bowls in plastic wrappings, and behind her Chad was standing with 4 very full-looking bags. What the hell are you doing? She asked with a raised eyebrow, looking between her brother and Naruto. Put my idiot brother down, we got a present for ya. Naruto blinked before doing as he was told. He let go of Ichigo's robe and let him fall to the floor with an umph. Is that Naruto began, his mouth already salivating. He could actually smell the ramen, and he was already wandering over to Karen with his mouth watering. Yeah, Chad thought we should get you something as a thanks for helping us out earlier. I suggested ramen since that's the only thing you seem to like. Chad nodded from behind. Naruto actually had tears in his eyes. He began to wipe them on the bandages on his arm before suddenly lunging forward and grabbing Karen and Chad in a hug. You guys are the best, he cried happily. Even you big guy. I don't know who you are, but I can already tell you must be some kind of saint, placed on this earth by the gods themselves. Hey, get of me! Yelled Karen, struggling from inside the hug. Meanwhile, Rukia had unbound Ishida and helped Ichigo to his feet, although he was none too steady. The three of them stood just staring at the spectacle before them as the unstoppable berserker had been tamed by the sweet scent of ramen. They watched how Naruto disengaged from the hug, somehow with all the ramen bowls now balanced in his arms. With stars in his eyes, he set the bowls down carefully, like newborn babies. And then he pulled a pair of red chopsticks from seemingly nowhere, and created a brand new spectacle as he tore into the ramen, eating at a speed no human could possibly match. Roughly 10 minutes later, all 25 bowls of ramen were empty, and Naruto gave a satisfied burp. Karen herself had her arms crossed and a smirk on her face. She gave a nod before turning on her heel and walking off. He's a spiritual entity, said Ishida, although he didn't sound so sure. So how can he eat physical food? Ichigo gave a shrug. Well, spiritual entities can interact with the physical world. So they should be able to stomach it too. Ishida nodded his head. Yes, but it shouldn't actually provide them with any nutrition. Naruto, having heard their conversation, decided to jump in. Ramen is the food of the gods, he declared happily. And gods are a spiritual entity. If ramen can feed a god, it can feed a hollow too. Believe it! Ichigo blinked a few times. Believe it, or Databio? Can you stick to just one verbal tick? A distance away, Kisuke Uruhara had watched the entire spectacle. He'd shown up around the same time as the Minos, but decided not to intervene. The hollow interested him greatly. It was completely different to every other hollow, or even Erenser, that he'd ever seen before. Although it obviously gave off a feeling of being a hollow, there was nothing malefic, or even evil about it. Even when it had gone into what can only be called a ramen-induced berserk rage, it had the feeling of a righteous fury. From ramen, apparently. The hollow must actually worship the stuff. But what was even more interesting is that the hollow seemed to have some severe limits on its power. If those limits were taken off, he actually shouldered to think. Nonetheless, he smiled before flicking open his favorite paper fan. My. How interesting, he said in a sly tone. Come on, we're heading back. He turned to face Tensai, Jinta, and Yururu before walking past them. A minute later, they all turned to follow him. His body felt heavy. It was strange how a soul could bleed. How a weightless spirit could still succumb to gravity. How it could feel cold as his blood seeped out of him, mingling with the puddles made by the rain. He felt numb. If he was in his body, and he wasn't just a soul, he would be pretty sure this meant he was dying. As it stands, he couldn't imagine this feeling meaning anything different. But even so, he couldn't die yet. He still had to save her after all. She's right there. He can still hear. What's wrong with going to him? He gave his life for me. He tried to will his body. To make it stand. But it wouldn't. If only he could move. Even just a hand. Even just a finger. I understand. This child, he looks very much like him. He reached out with his hand. I'm dead, I look like somebody? You'd better not keep telling the story when I'm not around. Naruto watched how the battle play out. He watched as the orange-haired Shinigami was cut down trying to save that girl. She called the attacker brother. But the way he talked to her. And to kill her friend. Was that really what a brother would do? He'd never had a family, so he couldn't say for sure. But that just made this hurt even more. That girl was his family. Someone precious. So why was he hurting her? With that single question in his mind, he made his move. Byakuya barely had enough time to raise his sword to block the kick that was sent his way. Even so, the force was enough to send him hurtling away from Ichigo. Naruto landed, his usual cheerful face looking grim as he eyed the Shinigami. What the hollow? Came Rinji's voice from the sidelines. Naruto noticed the redheads charge him. But he wasn't in the mood for playing right now. As Rinji slashing down at an angle, he tilted his body at the same angle, allowing the blade to pass by his torso. Before Rinji could string together another blow, Naruto struck out with 2 fingers, burying them into the man's throat in a way that allowed him to hook them around Rinji's windpipe. Stay out of this, threatened Naruto, before removing his fingers, and lashing out with a kick. His heels slammed into Rinji's chest and sent him crashing into a wall. Rukia was surprised by the sudden reappearance of the hollow. Even more so by its power, as it effortlessly defeated Rinji. And to think she told Ichigo to fight against that before. But more importantly, Rinji was no longer holding on to her, and her brother was not nearby. So giving it no more thought, she quickly hurried over to Ichigo's side. Ichigo! She called out desperately. Ichigo! The orange-haired boy groaned but nonetheless managed to give Rukia a weak smile. I'm fine, he told her, before coughing up a lump of blood. What are you doing, hollow? Remarked Byakuya from the place he'd been kicked to, reminding the two of their would-be savior. Naruto frowned. I heard you talking. She's your sister, right? So why do you hurt her? Byakuya titled his head, as if regarding the hollow. She has broken the law. Yes, but from what I heard it was to save this boy's life. Byakuya frowned. The reasons do not matter. By order of Central 46 she will stand trial. Naruto cocked his head to the side. Ah, so you're one of those types. One of those who cares more for their own pride than they do for family or friends. Byakuya regarded the hollow with interest. It was because of this interest that he had not immediately struck the hollow down. But now his patience was beginning to wear thin. We are of the Kachiki clan, a noble house who act as a moral compass for those of a lower stature. We must follow the rules, or no one will, Byakuya explained. But the hollow did not seem satisfied with this answer. And you believe this reason will allow your clan to keep its head held high? Funny. Where I come from, if you had spouted such a reason, you would have been considered lower than scum. No, even scum would be too kind a word for you. At this the elder Kachiki's eyes narrowed. Who are you to judge me? Nothing but a lowly, filthy hollow. I have had enough of speaking with you. I will kill you now. And like that Byakuya was gone. But so was Naruto. 3 observers heard a clash and then the 2 combatants reappeared. They'd met halfway towards each other. Naruto had blocked Byakuya's sword with his right arm, and Byakuya had grabbed Naruto's right wrist just before he'd plunged it into Byakuya's stomach. As it was, Naruto's middle finger had punctured the skin, allowing a small dribble of blood to run down the front of Byakuya's front. In a similar way, a trickle of blood could be seen coming from Naruto's arm, where Byakuya's sword had managed a shallow cut. Is that the best you can do, Shinigami? Asked Naruto. His tone was light, almost cheerful. Byakuya glared. Do not be conceited, hollow. When we captain and sub-captain class Shinigami come to the human world, our powers are restricted to 20% of their usual maximum. Naruto's eyes widened. So that's why you're so weak. This was obviously not the answer Byakuya was looking for, as he pushed Naruto away before retaking his stance. I will take your head, hollow. Byakuya's face was usually an emotionless mask. But to Rinji, who had spent so much time with the man, Byakuya looked clearly enraged. Not that he could point that out, as he was currently busy trying to stem the blood flow from his throat. Naruto had made sure to not damage anything, but even so, a hole in one's throat is never the nicest of wounds. Without a word, the 2 combatants disappeared once more, at speeds none there could follow. But neither Rinji nor Rukia could believe their eyes when they saw Byakuya's face hit the tarmac. Naruto soon appeared behind him but didn't move from there. He seemed content to wait for Byakuya to get up. After a few seconds, Byakuya put both hands flat on the ground and pushed himself up. The way he did it was slow, regal even. Like having his face planted into the ground was something barely worth acknowledging. He slowly turned to face Naruto once again. Leave, hollow, you have no business here. Naruto snorted. What, you can't beat me, so now you try reasoning? Tell me, when that girl begged you not to hurt her friends, did you listen? Byakuya narrowed his eyes. I admit that without removing my limit, you are too much for me. However, hollow, I doubt a being such as yourself can understand a concept such as reason. No, I am telling you to leave, for these matters do not concern you. Naruto practically growled at the man. It looks like you aren't getting it. I'm not letting you take the girl. I've watched the 2 of them over the last few weeks. They've been a lot of fun. That's why you leave. And until you understand what it means to have a family, and how precious that bond is, do not come back. The last words Naruto spoke were in a demonic voice, and as he said them, the very air around him seemed to ripple and the ground began to crack. Byakuya's eyebrows shot up. The hollow's spiritual pressure was rising. Now it was double what it was before. Triple now, and it showed no signs of stopping. His legs began to wobble under the strain of standing. I see now, he calmly stated, that you cannot be allowed to live. He raised his blade, though admittedly with some difficulty. Scatter, Sambanzakura. Upon the command, Byakuya's sword separated into 1,000 tiny pieces. Flashed of yellow, silver and pink could be seen under the light of the lamppost. It's over, Rinji managed to grunt out. Ichigo had been watching the battle from his position on the floor. He'd watched as Naruto seemed to overpower Byakuya. He'd felt happy and grateful to the hollow for protecting Rukia. But at the same time, he'd felt so jealous of him for doing what he could not. And then Byakuya whispered some words and his sword fell apart. And then his eyes widened with horror as Naruto was suddenly cut to ribbons. Was this it? If Naruto fell now, what would happen to Rukia? But then he heard a sound. One of the most annoying sounds he can ever remember hearing, and he felt his lips curl up at the end. Poof. Byakuya stared in confusion as the hollow turned into a cloud of smoke. Realizing what this meant, he quickly brought his arm up to defend. Only now he had no blade to defend with. Dynamic entry! Came Naruto's ridiculous battle cry, and much like he did with Ichigo, he landed a perfect kick to Byakuya's face. He barely had enough time to register the blow before he was crashing right into Renji, the two of them quickly falling into a pile of crumbled limbs. Renji shifted his captain off him in order to stand before realizing what he'd just done. He'd had to shift his captain himself. Did that mean that? Yes, Byakuya Kuchiki, head of the noble Kuchiki clan and captain of the 6th Division, was now unconscious. See, Captain, sputtered Renji, temporarily forgetting about his throat and letting some blood squirt out. Gah! He quickly covered the wound with one hand, and with the other brought out his sword. He stabbed it into seemingly thin air, and to Naruto's surprise a door appeared. Oh wow, is that a door to Soul Society? We Hollows can open a door to Hueco Mundo. It's called Gargantua. Renji just narrowed his eyes at the hollow. Whatever, this isn't over. Rukia, for now you can stay here, but soon we'll come back to get you. And you'll regret siding with the human. Renji didn't spare her a second glance as he heaved his captain over his shoulder and hobbled through the door to Soul Society. A moment later the door closed and disappeared. Rukia spent a few seconds just staring into the air before remembering Ichigo was in a critical condition. Ichigo, are you okay? She said softly. She knew he wasn't. Her brother had cut two very important places for a soul, the Seketsu chain and the Hakusui soul sleep. Without these, Ichigo would lose all of his soul reaper powers, even if he does manage to live through this. I cough, fine, Rukia, replied Ichigo weakly. He tried to grin to reassure her. But he found the effort rather painful and just ended up coughing up more blood. Hollow. Naruto perked up, hearing Ichigo call for him. Although he'd still much prefer it if Ichigo would call him by his name. He had done that absolutely awesome self-introduction they'd met after all. He made his way over, occasionally shifting his arms under the cloak which had become heavy with the rain. He bent down on his knees so that he was squatting, causing his cloak to pool in the rain and blood that was surrounding Ichigo. What is it, Strawberry? Asked Naruto. Ichigo frowned, which didn't take any effort since his mouth had pretty much set in that shape. Don't call me that, he muttered. Well, don't call me Hollow, relied Naruto with a grin. You know what, I was going to thank you, but now I don't think I'm going to bother. Naruto pouted. Look, I have a name. Do you know how annoying it is that nobody uses it? Ichigo sighed, before coughing again. Fine then, Naruto. Thank you for saving Rukia. Naruto grinned. You're welcome. Ichigo finally lost consciousness, and with that no more words were spoken, but the rain continued falling. Oh my, oh my. Rukia looked up and Naruto looked behind him, to see a man wearing a green haori and green and white stripy hat with a black umbrella held above his head. Do you need a hand? Aizen was furious. Of course this did not show on his face, which retained a smiling posture. He just received Vice Captain Aburai's report along with the rest of the captains. His carefully laid plans had taken a major hit. The Hogyoku was back in Urahara's possession, and now getting access to it would become difficult. Perhaps he could send some of his espada to retrieve it. But he knew Urahara. He was a crafty man, and no doubt he'd already laid out plans in the event of an attack. There was no use in losing upon this early on. He would have to wait. But there was a silver lining to all of this. The hollow that Aburai had described. It took on a human appearance and defeated Captain Byakuya with his bare hands. Of course he had been limited to a fifth of his full power, but then from the report it didn't sound like the hollow was fighting at full strength either. And he wasn't the only one who seemed interested in this hollow. Yamamoto seemed rather disturbed by the news as well. And Captains Kairaku and Ukitake seemed to share a grin. And so now he would have to plan around this setback. Because one way or another the Hogyoku would be his. Are you telling me that the reason I am being sentenced to such a severe punishment for what would otherwise be an understandable infraction of the rules are the machinations of one man? Urahara grinned behind the fan in front of his face. That was a lot of big words, Miss Kuchiki, but yes, that's basically right. I placed a treasure inside of you, and someone is going to very extreme lengths to claim it. Rukia snarled. So this is your fault. Urahara waved her off. Hey, let's not place blame here. I had to find a way to keep it safe. And you did this by placing it in the jugai of a low-ranking Shinigami who had lost her powers, and if not for the timely interference of a hollow of all things, would be easy pickings? Urahara stopped waving his fan. Alright, I admit it wasn't my best plan. But I was really limited on my options. This was the only way to destroy it. Rukia creased her eyebrows together in confusion. How would hiding it away inside me destroy it? Urahara started waving his fan again. Ah well, that's the brilliant bit. You see, that jugai slowly filters away your ryatsu and bonds your soul to it. Eventually you'd become a full human. Of course, at the end of your human life your soul would return to soul society, and the Hogyoku would die along with the jugai. Brilliant, right? Urahara was suddenly yanked forward by tiny fists grabbing his Haori and pulling him closer to her now furiously red-looking face. You were going to turn me into a human? You know what? After I finish beating you to a pulp, I'm going to give your shop the worst reviews it could possibly have and make sure that everyone knows about it. Calm down, Miss Kichiki. It's not all bad. It would only be a century at the very most, and besides you could have spent it with Ichigo. Rukia suddenly let go of his Haori, letting him fall back to his seating position. Well, what are you suggesting? She stammered, her face going red for an entirely different reason. But before Urahara could respond, a cry was heard throughout the entire house. Well, it looks like Ichigo's awake. Ichigo had indeed woken up, glad he was not dead. But this happiness only lasted a moment as he opened his eyes and saw two faces way too close to his own. Wah! Both faces jumped back. A quick response, very good, said one of the faces, that he recognized as belonging to that big guy who was always around hat and clogs. Morning, Ichigo, said Naruto in his usual happy voice. Only there was something very different about him. His hollow aura seemed to be gone, and he seemed to be wearing an orange t-shirt and white shorts. The ring around his neck had been replaced with a black headband with a metal plate along with the stylized leaf that he'd had on. There was also a black cat perched in his hair. Noticing where Ichigo was looking, Naruto grinned. He reached up and took the cat out of his hair. He held the cat around its middle in front of Ichigo's face. This is Yo-Yo. Say hi, Yo-Yo, said Naruto. Hi, said the cat blandly, much to Ichigo's surprise. Apparently satisfied, Naruto placed the cat back in his hair, where it quickly took up its previous position with a satisfied look on its face. Boss, Mr. Kurosaki is awake, called the big guy with the glasses. Ichigo didn't want to stay with the strange guy any longer, so he started trying to get out of the bed, ignoring the pain that racked through his body with every movement. No, Mr. Kurosaki, your wounds have barely closed. Ichigo looked up to see Urahara walking through a door, followed closely by, to his relief, Rukia. If you move around too much you'll die, said Urahara cheerfully. Hat and clogs, whispered Ichigo. So this is your house? Yes, answered Urahara happily, snapping his fan shut as he did so. Ichigo looked down. Did you save us? Urahara stretched out his face in a grin. You sound upset. But it was Naruto over there who saved you. I just patched you up. Ichigo glanced at the grinning blonde beside him before realizing something. Hey, what about Yuryu? He was there too. Ah yes, he went home. His wounds weren't too bad so I could heal him on the spot. But before he left he gave me a message for you. He said you need to toughen up. Because those Shinigami are going to come back, and the only one who can protect her is you. Rukia's response to this was to smash her fist into the top of Naruto's head, causing the cat to jump off his head. Ow, hey, what was that for? And are you related to Sakura by any chance? Who? Said Rukia, whilst massaging her fist. Naruto had been placed in a special jugai so she didn't have to worry about his hero, but he still had quite a hard head and commented on such. Your head's like a rock. Naruto stopped rubbing his head and grinned at her. Yep, it's been tempered by decades of an angry female hitting it whenever she gets mad for reasons that don't make sense. Rukia frowned at him. Ooh, that sounds interesting, Naruto. I hope you won't mind answering some questions for me later. But for now we have a bigger problem. Which is that you, Master Ichigo Kurosaki, have lost your Shinigami powers. And if you're going to protect Rukia we're going to need to sort that out. You know, interrupted Rukia. If you just let me have my Shinigami powers back I could protect myself. But Uruhara shook his head. For now that's not an option, replied Uruhara. But do you know what is an option? Getting Ichigo's powers back. Ichigo was on his feet in seconds. There's a way to do that? How? Oh, so you wish to protect Miss Kichiki with your life then? Said Uruhara teasingly. Ichigo slammed his hand down on the nearest thing, which happened to be Naruto's head. Of course I do. Rukia's face blushed red and Uruhara's grin widened. But Naruto just made a whining noise and started rubbing his head again. Alrighty then. For now take these pills, said Uruhara, tacking a bottle with a skull on the front of it from out of his sleeve. Take one of these every hour and by tonight your wounds should be gone. He shoved the pills into Ichigo's hands. For now you and Rukia can head home. We'll start tomorrow. Go to school though, we don't want your family to know anything's wrong yet. Plus from what I know it's the last day of school anyway. Ichigo nodded. After that you'll be training with me and Naruto every day. We'll start with a 10-day-long survival training. As long as you can survive that you'll be making progress in leaps and bounds. As long as you survive, of course. Naruto was sitting at Kasuke's table, happily slurping up some ramen. Having nowhere to stay other than abandoned houses, he had gladly taken up on Uruhara's offer to stay there for a bit. Beside him, there were 15 empty bowls piled up high. Yoruichi was curled up in Naruto's hair, one of the most comfortable places in the world in her own opinion. Across from Naruto, Kasuke was sitting with his legs folded, his fan out and a grin on his face. Although the grin was mostly fake, as inside he was still flinching from the price that all this ramen had cost him. So then Naruto, Uruhara said, I was hoping you could answer some questions for me. Slurp, sure, Naruto said before moving on to another bowl. Go ahead. Right, said Uruhara, not deterred in the slightest. It's quite obvious that you're holding a lot of your power back. I was wondering what level of hollow you are. I'm going to guess an Ajukas or maybe even a Vasto Lord. Naruto continued to slurp ramen for a moment before putting it down and looking at Kasuke. The humorous aura in the room seemed to have been replaced with a serious one. Even Yoruichi seemed to tense up. And then Naruto spoke. An Aju what? And what the hell's a Vasto Lord? There was a loud shriek of a meow as Yoruichi fell from Naruto's hair. Uruhara would have laughed if he wasn't too busy trying not to face-plant himself. I don't know anything about levels. I try not to spend much time in Hueco Mundo. It's rather dull there. I train a lot though. I'm a Kaiga level ninja if that helps. Never one to be deterred, Kasuke just flashed a smile before moving on to his next question. When I first brought you here yesterday you introduced yourself as the prankster god of Hueco Mundo. If you were the single god of Hueco Mundo then pranking god would have made more sense. But you make it sound like you're a god who specializes in pranking. Does this mean there are other gods of Hueco Mundo? Naruto's eyes comically widened. Wow, you're really smart. Although that reasoning sounded like total bullshit. Yeah, there are 4 of us. Although Barry thinks he's the only real god and the rest of us are just posers. Uruhara raised an eyebrow, and Yoruichi returned to her position on Naruto's head. Naruto raised a hand and scratched her behind her ear. Barry? Yeah, Barry. I can't remember his full name. I'm pretty sure it sounded stupid anyway. He made an entire kingdom of hollows who all worshipped him. Well, until they were all killed a few centuries ago anyway. This time Uruhara did lose a bit of his composure. An entire army got wiped out, he said, letting some genuine curiosity into his voice. Naruto was now on his 20th bowl of ramen, and didn't even look up to Uruhara when he answered. Yeah, some brown-haired guy with glasses. Looked and felt kinda like a Shinigami actually. He asked me to help him out about a century ago, but his smile looked so fake I just couldn't take him seriously. It was like a child trying to forge a banknote, and decided to print one of the internet. Yes, I know what the internet is. I've been around a while. So I decided the guy needed to brighten up, you know? So I brightened him up. With a little bit of yellow, a little bit of pink. And nice sky blue hair to finish. Uruhara dropped his fan and his jaw dropped. Yoruichi fell out of Naruto's hair again. Naruto actually stopped eating his ramen for a moment so he could frown at her. They knew he was talking about Aizen. What he said was a basic description of him. How, said Kasuke, for once in his life actually speechless. How what? It was just some paint. Nothing to gawk over. That blind guy didn't seem to think so though. Tried to kill me after that. There was a guy with a creepy grin there too, but he just broke down laughing. It's nice to know someone appreciates a good joke. Kasuke and Yoruichi were silent for a minute while they processed this information. But then, Wahahaha! Burst out Kasuke, while he banged his fists on the table. Yoruichi seemed to be having trouble breathing. Naruto just grinned, glad they found his story entertaining. He was caught by surprise though when Yoruichi went up in smoke. He stared wide-eyed as in the cat's place there was now a naked woman with caramel skin and purple hair rolling around on the floor naked. Yo-yo's a chick! He exclaimed in surprise. A naked chick! A hot naked chick! Kasuke carried on laughing but Yoruichi stopped, now fully aware that she'd lost control of her transformation. Not that she really cared if he saw her naked. It's just, she'd lost the ability to surprise him with it now. She looked up to see Naruto with a curious look on his face. He reached out with a hesitant hand. She watched it with a slight glare as it came closer. If he dared try to fondle her, she was going to scratch his eyes out. Instead though he brought his hand to behind her ear and started scratching. She couldn't help it. She purred. Kasuke, who had stopped locking to watch what was happening, began to giggle again as Yoruichi began purring. Naruto had a satisfied look on his face though. He looked back to Kasuke with a grin, showing he was okay for any more questions. Alright, said Kasuke. Why are you called gods then, and what about the other two? Naruto brought his free hand to his chin as he gave the question dome thought. Well, there are several reasons really. The first one is because we were the first natural Arrancar. Kasuke's eyes widened a little but he didn't interrupt. Well, except me. I was like this from the start, but the other three all became Arrancar really fast too. The other reason is because we all have abilities which people, or even hollows, really shouldn't have. Said Urahara, filing this information away. Hollows like that could cause some real problems if they ever came to the living world. Can you tell me about these abilities? Naruto scratched his chin with his hand before it reached out for his chopsticks again. Well, I can tell you about berries. But Hashi and Crow are my friends, so I'd rather not tell you about those two unless they say I can. You guys seem nice but I don't really trust you yet. It'll take more than 30 bowls of ramen to buy my trust. Really, then how about 100? Asked Kasuke pleasantly. But Naruto glared at him. I won't rat my friends out, no matter how much ramen you offer me. He wasn't going to reveal that he was actually tempted. Damn his ramen addiction, it could really function as a weakness sometimes. Kasuke gave a sigh. Yoruichi just carried on purring. She'd actually managed to move so she was using Naruto's lap as a pillow while he continued to scratch her behind the ear. Very well then. What kind of information can you give me on Barry? Naruto gave a grin. Right, well, he thinks he's the god king of Hueco Mundo, even though he got his ass kicked by Four Eyes. He has fast forward and Baywatch powers. Urahara raised an eyebrow. I'm afraid you've lost me. Oh well, he can make things go really fast, age-wise. Like living through your life in a second, you just kind of rot. And he can make things go slow and low like in that show Baywatch, which makes him pretty difficult to hit. He's the weakest of the four of us, but he's still really dangerous, especially with his powers. We've all learned to counter him over time, but in the beginning he was really annoying. It was never too hard to dodge him, but hitting him was a chore. Kasuke nodded. And you mentioned that he works for Aizen now. Naruto gave him a look. Who? The brown-haired guy with the glass. Oh, Four Eyes. Yeah, I think the guy is really good at genjutsu. Barry's a little stupid though. With his power he can just speed the genjutsu up and make it run its course. Or maybe he doesn't have good enough control of his power to do that without harming himself. I'll laugh if he gets killed by his own power in the end. How ironic would that be? But yeah, he's part of Four Eyes' Arrancar army. Kasuke and narrowed his eyes straight away and Yoruichi stopped purring, her own eyes taking on a serious disposition. I suspected it, but to have it confirmed about how strong is this army, and where does Barry rank in it? Well, I think there are about 100 Arrancar so far. Well, last time I checked anyway. Barry was ranked second last time I was there. If I remember right, only the top 10 strongest are ranked in order of strength, but they keep changing. I was rather surprised to find someone even stronger than Barry there though. I'm actually not sure I can beat rank 1. Even if I used my resurrection, I think I'd still have some trouble beating that guy. Barry's rank might have changed though. They change all the time. There used to be a pretty green-haired girl. She was the only one who would laugh at my pranks. But she's gone now, and instead there's a pretty blonde girl. The green-haired girl's disappeared, she's not even there anymore. I see. Well, Naruto, I think our conversation is going to have to stop there. We seem to have visitors. Yoruichi, you might want to get changed. Yoruichi shot up into a sitting position while blinking before noticing the very weak spiritual pressure outside the door. She'd been so busy enjoying herself she hadn't even noticed someone coming. With a poof of smoke, she turned back into a cat and hoped onto Naruto's head. Not a word of my true form to anyone, she warned, before stretching herself out and getting comfortable. Sure thing, Yo-Yo. Not a moment later, the door slid open, and Ichigo walked in. Oh, welcome Ichigo, Rukia. How are your wounds? Asked Urahara with a grin. Ichigo seemed to believe he needed to yank his shirt open to show off his scars for this next part. All healed, he said before Rukia whacked him over the head. Ow, what was that for? There is a lady present. Keep your shirt closed, please. In reality, she just didn't like seeing the scars. They made her feel guilty. Well, that's good. Oh, and what did you tell your father? Asked Urahara curiously. I said I was sleeping over at a friend's, said Ichigo, as he buttoned up his shirt. Well, that's fine, but it sounds like an excuse for doing certain other things to me, said Urahara, with a weird look on his face. Grr, I'll kill you, muttered Ichigo, but Urahara just walked off into another room. Why didn't you just tell him what you're actually doing? Asked Naruto as Ichigo passed him. My dad isn't spiritually aware. He's just stupid. It would be better for him not to know about any of this stuff. He'd just worry. Ichigo and Rukia disappeared into the next room, leaving Naruto behind, who blinked in his confusion. But he can see me just fine? Ichigo was not happy with his training. For such a small kid, Ururu had one hell of a punch. He had no doubt at all that if she landed a hit she would kill him. So he ran and ran like his life depended on it, all to the amusement of a certain shopkeeper. Hey Rukia, can you hold Yo-Yo for me please? Naruto had come in, without any of them noticing either. Rukia gave him a look but did as asked, taking the small black cat and allowing it to curl up in her arms. Hey Mr. Hat, can you get me out of this thing please? Said Naruto to Kasuke, pointing at his body. Urahara simply nodded before tapping his head with his cane, expelling Naruto from his Jugai. What are you doing, Naruto? Asked Urahara. Whatever it was, he was sure it wasn't going to be good. Well, the thing is that while saving Rukia that day was all well and good, we're all at the mercy of Soul Society right now. I doubt picking up Rukia is their top priority right now, but next time they'll send a captain without the limiter. If that doesn't work, then 2 captains and so on. It won't take them long to find this place. Strawberry might not have enough time to finish his training, so I figured I could go and stall for time. Urahara frowned. You're going to Soul Society? I'm not sure if that's the best idea. Plus it will take me about 7 days to open a gate even if you did want to go. Naruto nodded. That's fine, I can make my own way. Gargantua can G pretty much anywhere you know, it's just most hollows aren't stupid enough to take it to Soul Society. Some still do go there though. I'm pretty sure I can get in undetected. I figure if I raise a little chaos I should be able to keep them focused on me. I should be able to keep them occupied for at least a week. Urahara raised an eyebrow. Confident, aren't you? Naruto grinned. Yep. Well then get going. You are right, we need all the time we could get. If they'd managed to take Rukia we'd have been given a month to prepare, but as it is, they can attack us now whenever they like. Good luck, Naruto. Naruto gave a mock salute. Be right back. And then he reached out and seemed to claw a black hole into existence. Without another word he stepped into it and was gone, the hole closing up behind him. Just as Naruto left, there was a gigantic explosion. Everyone looked over to see Ururu standing tall in front of a giant cloud of smoke. We missed it, whined Jinta. I wonder if he's dead. Meanwhile, Naruto had appeared in Rokungai. He'd squashed down all of his Ryatsu, suppressing it completely. He was a lot better at controlling Ryatsu than he was chakra. Well, he did have thousands of years to learn. He gave a sigh of relief. No hollow alarms had been triggered. And he'd wound up quite close to the Surutei. Now I just need to get in, he grinned. It didn't take him long before he made his way over to the first gate, where to his surprise a giant dropped down in front of him. Halt! I am Jidanbo, the gatekeeper. None have ever made it past me. Now state your name and purpose or I will destroy you. Oh, my name is Naruto. I have an appointment with Grandpa Yamamoto. Jidanbo's eyebrows widened. You are related to the Captain Commander. Naruto's foot suddenly crashed into his head, as he landed a rather powerful drop kick. Nope, said Naruto cheerfully. But he's really old, so I call him Grandpa. Jidanbo couldn't hear. He'd fallen over unconscious, causing a small earthquake when he landed. Well, I guess I'll just let myself in. Naruto walked up to the gate and hooked his fingers under it. He gave a grunt of exertion as he pulled it up, allowing him to slip through underneath. He dropped it down again quietly, careful not to let it slam. Well, that was easy. They really need better security. Well, I'd better go find the head captain. We need to have a chat. The captains were all in a meeting, discussing what to do about the current situation. Byakuya was insistent that if his limiter was released then the hollow would not be a problem, but Mayuri was arguing that a containment team should be sent to capture such a unique hollow so he could perform some of his tests. Zaraki wanted to go because he wanted to fight the hollow, and strangely enough Shunsui, who said there was something he wanted to check out. Aizen also wished to go, saying he wished to meet such a strange hollow for himself. Yamamoto had been oddly quiet on the matter, allowing his subordinates to argue it out. This continued for about 10 minutes before the head captain's voice suddenly rung out. I know you're there. Reveal yourself. The captains stopped arguing as they gave the commander a look. They couldn't feel anybody. But someone did appear, in the center of the room. And no sooner did he appear than he was rushed by Byakuya and strangely by Kaname. But the two captains were stopped when Yamamoto shouted out once more. Halt! Both captains did so, their blades mere inches away from a still grinning Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. I did not think we would ever meet again. Naruto flashed him a big smile. Nice to see you too, Grandpa. Then he looked around the room. Blimey, it's like this is your life in here. Hi, Big Sis. Hi, Uncle Joshiro. Hi, Uncle Shunsui. And Four Eyes, good to see you again. You too, Cheese Grin. And I'm sorry, Mr. Blind Person, I'm still trying to come up with a non-offensive nickname for you. The first three captains mentioned bowed their heads in greeting to Naruto, but the later three did not. Cheese Grin, mumbled Jin. Couldn't he have come up with something better? Alright, so I seem to know most of you guys, but for those who don't, I'll introduce myself. He hoped backwards, away from the two captains adopting his kabuki stance. Among the spiritual planes, I have been given many names. Some worship me as a god and others hunt me as the devil. I am the man who makes harems seem legitimately possible. With just a flash of my sexiness any girl will drop at my feet, and with just a flash of my awesomeness any man will back away from battle with me. I am. And at this point he released his Ryatsu, allowing it to wash over the captains, and revealing his status as a hollow to those who weren't aware. The prankster god of Hueco Mundo, Naruto Uzumaki. Believe it! Most of the captains were visibly stunned. Some because of the tacky introduction, and others because they couldn't believe he was a hollow. However, one captain was not stunned. Retsu Unohana, without ever dropping her disarming smile, had saddled up to Naruto, and smacked him on top of his head, causing him to drop down and smack his head of the ground. Ow, Big Sis, what was that for? She raised an eyebrow at him. Legitimately possible harem? My, what have you been up to, Naruto? He replied, seemingly stuck for words. That was a joke. As it should be, Unohana answered back pleasantly before shaking her hand out. You have a very hard head. Yeah, it's my anti-violent girl defense. Suddenly he felt a wash of killer intent wash over him. Who's a violent girl? Unohana all but hissed, although her smile didn't drop one bit. Not you, Big Sis. Unohana nodded her head happily. Good, I thought as much. Seemingly done with scolding Naruto, Unohana turned around and retook her position in the lineup of captains. While this has all been very entertaining, Uzumaki, what exactly are you doing here, and why did you prevent Captain Kachiki from arresting a fugitive? Naruto stood up, rubbing his head. Unohana had a mean swing. Because she's not a fugitive. Rukia didn't do anything wrong. Although I really just beat Byakuya up because of his attitude. People should treasure their family, not actively seek to kill their friends. Which reminds me, that guy totally tried to murder Strawberry. Aren't there laws against that? Not if he tried to interfere in the mission. Naruto frowned. Oh, come on, Grandpa, he was just trying to help his friend out. Nothing bad has happened. She just saved 4 lives, and apparently she's going to be executed for it. Yamamoto narrowed his eyes, or he would have if they weren't already narrowed. How do you know about that order? No such information as to Rukia Kachiki's punishment had been given at the time Captain Kachiki had been sent to apprehend her. Naruto realized he had screwed up a bit. How was he going to answer without implicating Urahara? Well, how about half the truth? That never hurts. You're being played, Grandpa. Think about it. You don't think Rukia deserves such a bad punishment either, do you? Yamamoto took his time answering. He realized that Naruto had dodged the question but didn't try to follow up on it. He knew that if Naruto was holding information back, then nothing short of a hostage would make him give it up. My opinion does not matter. These orders come from Central 46, whose power was given onto them by the Spirit King himself. But isn't the fact they would give such an order suspicious? Think about it, Grandpa. It serves no purpose. It's far too harsh a punishment for much too small a crime. Plus, she's a noble. And what kind of message is it going to send out to the other Shinigami? Rukia's actions saved 4 lives, 5 if you include her own. The punishment doesn't make any sense unless there's an ulterior motive. And if there's an ulterior motive, then it's not justice, it's greed. And I never mistook you for someone who would confuse the two. Are you really going to let this go through, Grandpa? Before Yamamoto could answer, Jin stepped forward, after catching a look from Aizen. Forgive me, Head Captain, but I've been wondering this for a while now. Why are we listening to this hollow? And why are we not trying to kill it? Jin was not prepared for the wave of killing intent that suddenly rose up from 3 different captains, namely Ukitake, Shunsui, and Unohana. The reason for this is simple, Captain Ikimaru. 1,000 years ago, this hollow before you saved over 200 Shinigami from a horrible fate. Admittedly, I attacked him anyway at the time, but after 5 hours of failing to do any damage at all, I gave up. Plus, Captain Ukitake and Captain Shunsui were nagging at me to stop the entire time. Jin raised an eyebrow. Not Captain Unohana? She seems rather protective of him. Oh, quite the contrary, she was trying to help me kill him. She was the original Kenpachi after all, and she'd been rather impressed with his power. Well, the results of that night was that many Shinigami decided to have a party, and Naruto was invited. I do remember banning you from the Suritai the next morning though, Naruto. Naruto frowned. Oh, come on, Grandpa, it was a joke. Yes, but it took 3 months to clean up. Naruto just mumbled something about no one appreciating a good joke. I thought you would have forgotten about it by now. I do not forget these things, Naruto. Naruto pouted before he suddenly shook his head. We're getting off topic. Look, you need to look into this. Like now. Just go and ask Central 46 for their reasons, that's all I'm asking. Oh, and order all the captains to stay here as well. Yamamoto was actually about to consider what Naruto had said when he caught on to the implications of his last statement. Did you just imply we have a traitor in our midst, Naruto? He asked. His voice was completely calm, but you could feel the anger behind it. Naruto said, considering the best way to answer the question. Maybe 1 or 2. But I have no proof, and I can guarantee they could come up with an alibi, so no point in pointing fingers. Yamamoto considered Naruto's words before remembering something else. When he had come in, Naruto had greeted 3 captains he knew should not have met him. Ken Tozen, Jin Ikimaru, and Aizen Sosuke. He greeted all 3 of them even though he should never have met them. It's not really proof. He could have just picked those 3 at random and then come up with nicknames for them on the spot. But this wouldn't be the first time that Aizen has been implicated. Head Captain, you cannot seriously believe the words of a hollow, can you? Asked Tozen. He could simply be here by the order of another hollow to use your trust in him to spread some anarchy and discord throughout the Soul Society. Regardless of any accusations, he does raise a good point, said Ukitake. If you think about it, the punishment of my subordinate decided by Central 46 does more harm than good. But none of us have put much thought into why Central 46 would make a decision. I confess I simply assumed they had become high on power and didn't think more of it. Yamamoto leveled a glare at Ukitake for his disrespect but didn't comment. I agree that an inquiry should be made into this decision, and as per Naruto's suggestion, I see no harm in the rest of us waiting here for the head captain to return. Ukitake smiled around at the rest of the captains. There really was no good reason to not do as he suggested. Indeed, I second this suggestion, said Aizen pleasantly. He was a little stuck here. He never thought that a hollow would simply waltz in here and start tearing his plans apart. But all was not yet lost. He had a few more tricks to play. However, the Central has been acting strange as of late. I was rather curious as to the circumstances of the execution myself, and decided to seek an audience. However, I was refused entry. They are not allowing anyone in until a full 2 weeks after the set execution date of Rukia Kachiki. Of course, it would be good if they were to make an exception for the head captain, but I'm afraid things may not go as smoothly as you seek. Yamamoto gave a small nod. Very well. I will take Captain Yukitake's advice. It escaped no one's notice he chalked it up to Yukitake rather than Naruto. I will return soon. In the meantime, no one is to leave this room. Yamamoto raised his cane and hit it off the ground once. After that, he turned and hobbled out of the room. His walking speed was slow, befitting of an old man. You would never have guessed he was the most powerful of all Soul Reapers. There was silence for a few minutes after Yamamoto left. But it was soon broken by Kenpachi. So then, Naruto. I heard you were pretty strong. Wanna fight? He gave Naruto the biggest shit-eating grin he could muster. Did you say we have to take lessons? Asked Oriheim. She and Chad had been called together and were met by Kat. That's correct, answered Yorichi. In order to help your friend Ichigo, you're going to need to train. My lessons are quite strict. Sure, let's do lessons, Oriheim replied cheerily. So what if she's a cat? Right now I'm being taught by fairies. Good, follow me then, said Yorichi before trotting off. Oriheim quickly followed. Chad was left standing by himself. Oriheim answered too quickly. That cat just randomly walked up to us. And they didn't even wait for my answer. Omake, how Naruto met Ichigo's mother. Masaki Kurosaki was walking home one day when she came across a rather peculiar sight. There was a young man with messy blonde hair and a brown cloak who was seemingly standing in midair painting her adoptive aunt's mansion neon green. She was amazed though, because although she could see the man, she couldn't feel him. She just didn't register to her senses. He's keeping quite the lid on his Ryatsu, she thought. But then so was she. She'd had to learn to smother Ryatsu so she could sneak out of the mansion without getting caught. So by being as quiet as possible, she was able to sneak up on the man without him noticing, close enough to hear him sniggering to himself. This will teach those Quincy's not to be so high-strung. Especially that old grandma. Someone really needs to pull the stick out her ass. Maybe painting the roof neon purple will help. Masaki couldn't stop herself from giggling. She tried moving her hand to her mouth to stop herself, but she wasn't quick enough. The man heard her and quickly spun around. Wow, you snuck up on me. No one sneaks up on me. Well, except for that cat, but that is a really freaky cat, I swear. It has powers, I swear. Every time we play tag, it's like it knows where I am. You'd think it could sense me the way it follows me round. Masaki had to suppress another giggle as the man went off on a complete tangent, apparently quickly forgetting she was even there. So she'd have to remind him. My name's Misaki. Misaki Kurosaki. What's yours? She asked politely. Naruto stopped his rant to grin at her. Did you just ask who I am? Well, I'll tell you. He jumped into the air and spun. When he stopped, his legs were apart, and his right arm was straight with the fingers curled, and his left was held out in the air. Listen up, and do not be deterred if you find you cannot take your eyes of me. It is a common occurrence when one gazes on my awesomeness. Whether you be Shinigami or Hollow, human or Quincy, there are none who have not at least heard legends of my deeds. Yes, my legend is carried by the tongue of many, so do not be surprised if you've heard of me. I am the great man who has traveled the deserts of Hueco Mundo from one side to the other, bringer terror and laughter all at once. Those who hear of me shy and cower away, knowing they cannot stand up to my greatness. Who am I, you ask? I am the prankster god of Hueco Mundo, Naruto Uzumaki. Believe it! Masaki stood silent for a moment. This was a Hollow. He was still keeping his Ryatsu compress, but she could see the hollow hole. Plus, all that talk about Hueco Mundo was a big giveaway. But despite this, Masaki just raised an eyebrow. You really need to work on that. Naruto dropped his arms and held an expression of disbelief. Eh? You need to practice, Masaki continued. The words didn't flow together well and you didn't say them right. I didn't? Naruto asked. Wow, no one has ever gave me criticism before. Well, what else do you think was wrong with it? Masaki put her finger to her chin in a thinking pose. Well, there were a few other things. Tell you what, I'm going to go inside and get changed, and then I'm going out for lunch. In the meantime, you finish painting the house, love the colors by the way, and then come with me and we'll go over it. Okay? Naruto gave a wide grin and an enthusiastic nod. Sure, that sounds great. Can we go get ramen? Masaki tilted her head and thought. You're a Hollow, right? Can you eat ramen? Naruto nodded his head vigorously. Ramen surpasses all racial, religious, and spiritual barriers. It is just that awesome. Masaki smiled. Then sure, we can go get ramen. Finish painting and then I'll be back out, okay? Naruto just grinned and nodded before grabbing his paintbrush and continuing from where he left off. Masaki headed inside with Man, I can't wait till Auntie learns about the house being painted. This will teach her to stop acting like a stuffy old vampire and actually go outside for once. Yamamoto's pace was much quicker once he left the assembly hall. With a quick shunpa, he was already halfway to the central 46 quarters. Within another moment, he was right outside the gate, where he was met by 2 guards squatting by the door. Strange, the guards are usually stationed inside, thought Yamamoto, staring the men up and down. The guards were wearing a piece of green armor not dissimilar in style to what ancient samurai used to wear. One had black spiky hair and a small black goatee. He looked rather sleepy and didn't respond at all to his presence. He was leaning against the wall with his zanpakuto leaning on his shoulder. The other had a mop of black hair had covered the right side of his face, leaving only the left side visible. Unlike his partner, he acknowledged Yamamoto by standing up straight and giving him a nod. Yamamoto remembered these 2 guards, although he hadn't seen either of them in over 1,000 years. Guard duty of Central 46 was usually conducted by high-seated officers who would rotate on and off duty every other century. Only the most loyal of the Shinigami would be offered the position. However, these 2 were an anomaly who for some reason insisted on taking the position pretty much permanently. Their names were Kotetsu Higain and Izumo Kamizuki. Captain Commander, we've been expecting you, said Izumo, the one who was actually standing. Yamamoto raised an eyebrow. Why were they expecting him exactly? I'm not entirely sure on the details, but the Central has become aware that a humanoid hollow has entered Soul Society illegally. The Central does not know why nothing has been done about it, and they are ordering you to capture said hollow at all costs. Failing that, destroy it. A hell butterfly will be sent soon with confirmation of these orders. Yamamoto bristled. If those were his orders, he would obey them. But in truth, he did not want to act against Naruto. Kotetsu then surprised him by standing up. They're going off on one in their Captain Commander, sir, he said quietly. They don't like the fact that the captains are questioning their orders. They might start throwing accusations of treason soon, sir. I'm sorry, there's not anything else I can do but warn you about it. Yamamoto nodded. These 2 were good Shinigami. They did their jobs, even if they complained a lot. But still. How exactly are the Central aware of what goes on in the captain's meeting? Asked Yamamoto in an authoritative tone. The guards just gave a shrug. I'm sorry, we don't know, sir. We just got called in and then commanded to wait out here. That's all I can tell you, sir. Yamamoto was silent for a moment. I see. I am actually here to request the reason behind the harshness of Rukia Kuchiki's chosen punishment. I seek an audience with the Central in regards to this matter. As the Captain Commander of the Godai 13, they will see me, he said, a dangerous tone in his voice. The guards started sweating a little, but Izumo shook his head. They gave us a response to this too, sir. They said that right now they no longer trust the Godai 13 and that until a later date where they once again feel they can trust you, you can't seek an audience, sir. Yamamoto bristled. What rubbish is this? We have done nothing to earn their distrust. Our concerns are perfectly justified and warranted considering the situation, he barked, causing the 2 guards to take a step back. I'm sorry, sir, but there's really nothing I can do, said Izumo, who was definitely feeling the Captain Commander's irritation. Yamamoto growled but quickly turned on his feet. Very well, but when this is over, I want a damn good reason for all of this. The Godai 13 are losing credibility among its Shinigami. It could very well cause disunity amongst the ranks. He hit his cane on the ground before hobbling off. The 2 guards watched him go before settling down again. There was silence between the 2 for a few moments before Kotetsu spoke up. Don't you think we have the best job ever? He asked without a trace of sarcasm. Izumo frowned. No, it sucks and it's boring as hell, he answered back. But I somehow feel comfortable here. Maybe we were gate guards in a past life. Kotetsu nodded his head. Maybe, he agreed. Wanna play I Spy? Izumo rolled his eyes but nodded. Yamamoto didn't use Shunpa since he wasn't looking forward to going back. He decided to take his time. This was probably the closest to being childish he was going to get. But after an hour had trickled by, he ended up back in front of the meeting hall of the Godai 13. What on earth happened? It looked like it had been destroyed. One of the doors had been blasted open and the other had flown off its hinges. The walls had been destroyed, and the ceiling had been reduced to rubble, and the floor and remainder of the walls were covered in scratches. Yamamoto gave a sigh. That's right. I left Naruto in there and took an hour getting back. Nonetheless, he hobbled inside to find that the floor had been cleared of all rubble, and the captains were all still standing in their places. He noticed that Kenpachi had a very wide grin on his face, and seemed to be covered with several cuts and bruises, and was bleeding all over the floor. He also noticed that Kuratsuchi's face seemed to have been burned half off, and his haori was nowhere to be seen. His clothes also looked to be rather singed. He also noticed that Naruto was also sporting a large grin, and there was a bit of blood splatter on his cloak. Other than that, he didn't seem any worse for wear. Yamamoto hobbled to his position at the front of the room, paying no attention to the rubble surrounding them. He took his place and stared around at all of his captains. "What exactly has transgressed here?" he asked with a weary sigh. Unohana, with her ever-present smile, decided to step forward to explain. Well, Captain Zaraki challenged Naruto to a fight, which Naruto eagerly accepted. The fight eventually ended after the majority of the room was destroyed and Captain Kachiki attempted to restrain or kill them. I'm not entirely sure which with his Zanpakuto. Yamamoto raised an eyebrow. Was it possible that the captain had actually lost his temper? It would explain the scratch marks on the floor. Afterwards, the two settled down on account of Captain Zaraki's Zanpakuto being broken. Naruto proceeded to give Captain Zaraki a lecture on the importance of bonds, ramen, and one's relationship with their Zanpakuto. Afterwards, Captain Kuratsuchi offered Naruto infinite free ramen in exchange for becoming a test subject. Naruto originally seemed very tempted by the deal before I pointed out that Kuratsuchi is the type to sew your mouth shut, then place the ramen in front of you so you can't eat it, and then observe the lengths you'll go to in order to be able to consume the ramen. Naruto then accused Captain Kuratsuchi of being a man named Orochimaru's illegitimate love child. Insults were soon exchanged, and this quickly escalated into another fight. Captain Zaraki got excited and once again joined in the fight. It ended just a short while ago due to the ceiling caving in. We all shifted the rubble and opted to wait in silence until you once again joined us. There was silence as Yamamoto processed all he'd been told. He gave a sigh. Truthfully, after he gave his next order, the ruin of the meeting hall would be the least of his problems. This matter will be dealt with at a later date, he declared, surprising everyone there. They were all sure they were going to get scolded. I have received orders from Central 46. Naruto Uzumaki. You are to be captured and detained. This order is for all captains. Yamamoto had barely finished talking, and Naruto was barely finished gaping like a fish when Tozen shot forward, his sword at the ready. At last I will no longer have to tolerate your presence, he whispered as he swung his Zanpakuto in an arc. His orders were to capture, of course, and he swung low, instantly slicing through Naruto's legs. It's over, he said calmly. But then, although he could not see it, the Naruto he cut poofed out of existence. You're right, it is over, said three voices surrounding him at once. Instantly confused as to where his opponent was coming from, Tozen managed to block a strike from his right but was not in time to stop the clone underneath him, kicking him into the air. And second clone appeared, kicking him even higher. Finally, the really Naruto appeared above Tozen, ready to kick him back down. Time for Uzumaki barrage, he cried. But he was interrupted. Shoot to kill Shinso. It was Jin, whose blade instantly extended at high speed, forcing Naruto to abandon his assault on Tozen. The blade impacted with Naruto, sending him flying backwards, seemingly impaled on the sword. But when the blade stopped expanding, the Shinigami was shown a rather interesting sight. Did he catch it with his teeth? Asked Hitsugaya, in a mixture of shock, awe, and surprise. Mat via Chep Fot, came Naruto's muffled voice. He released the blade from his teeth and disappeared into a Sonido, instantly appearing behind Jin. But that's okay, I can do those too. What the dash, said Jin, completely surprised by Naruto's speed. He'd barely been able to see him move, and was able to dodge the kick that was aimed at his head due to his instincts alone. Aizen was next, as he was standing right next to Jin, and swung his blade down. Naruto vaulted backwards, avoiding the blade by an inch. Tozen had finally regained his footing and charged at Naruto, just as Aizen stuck his hand out. Bakudo 61, Rikujikuro, came Aizen's calm voice. 6 rods of light appeared around Naruto, and shot towards him. But just as they were about to impact, Naruto flickered briefly before disappearing. But then in his places appeared Tozen. The 6 rods slammed into his midsection, and Aizen's eyes actually widened in surprise. Dynamic entry! Shouted Naruto, who appeared out of nowhere and drop-kicked the now-bound Ken-aim Tozen with quite a bit of force. One down! Shouted Naruto cheerfully, before poofing out of existence. Behind where he once stood was an irritated Soifan. Damn it, I thought I timed that perfectly, she cursed. It was pretty good timing actually, commented Naruto, who seemed to appear beside her, and slung an arm around her shoulder. But it's pretty hard to sneak up on me. Soifan was rather startled, although she didn't allow her face to show it. She hadn't felt his presence at all. He could have killed her just then. But she didn't let that stop her. She aimed a kick for his ankle, attempting to sweep him of his feet. But Naruto hoped backwards, just out of range. Soifan shot forwards, aiming a kick for the head, which was blocked by Naruto. She followed up with a shunpa, allowing her to appear behind him. She stabbed her Zanpakuto forward at the same time Naruto flipped backwards. But his cloak was still in front of her, blocking her vision, and when it finally moved, she was surprised to find another Naruto moving towards her with its fist cocked back and ready to punch her. Except Kaname had found his way back onto his feet. He dashed forwards and cut the Naruto clone in half before it could land its attack. He growled, having missed another opportunity to land a blow on the elusive blonde. "Are we really going to do this, Gramps?" asked Naruto, who had once again reappeared in the center of the room. "We've done this song and dance before, and we know how it goes." Yamamoto inwardly agreed. He already knew how this was going to end. In massive property damage. He was the only one here capable of capturing Naruto. Not because Naruto was ridiculously powerful, which he very well may be, although he honestly didn't know, but because it was next to impossible to land a good hit on the brat. Last time it had taken him 5 hours to land a seemingly decisive blow to the blonde, and even then he just regenerated. And if Naruto decides to flee, it's next to impossible to stop him, and it'll take a long while to find him. He was already aware before he gave the order that capturing Naruto was a near impossible task. But those were the orders given by Central 46, and impossible, or not, he had to carry them out. "Yes, brat, we really are going to do this. These orders come from Central 46. We are obligated to carry them out." Naruto just let out a sigh. "You're going to regret this, Gramps." And then he disappeared into a puff of smoke, as Soifan appeared behind him and stabbed through the clone. "Is it ever the real one?" she hissed. As soon as she finished hissing, a paintball shot straight past her head. It impacted on the wall behind Yamamoto. Interestingly, after it splattered, the paint ran down the wall, leaving a message made of red paint. Yamamoto turned slowly to read the message. "I said you're going to regret your decision, Grandpa, and you know I always keep my word. And yes, I had this message set up in advance in case things went south. Prepare yourself, Grandpa. You're about to relive the horror of my pranking spree. I have a message for every single one of you. Except you, big sis. You don't know when it will happen, or even where, but rest assured I will get you. I will prank you so hard your descendants from 1,000 years in the future will still be able to feel your embarrassment. Best regards. Naruto Uzumaki. The prankster god of Hueco Mundo. P.S. How awesome is this paint message? It's kind like one of those dying messages off those murder shows, but it's portable. If you think someone trying to kill you, just keep one on you and bam, instant dying message. Come on, it's cool, right? Yamamoto gave a sigh. It seems we have a situation. Rukia Kichiki's capture is no longer a priority. Captains and vice-captains are to remain within the Sereidii until further notice. We will need all of the manpower we have to stand a chance of capturing Naruto before he does any real damage to the Sereidii, came Yamamoto's booming voice. Aizen stepped forwards. Is this really necessary? He asked. Surely one hollow cannot pose that much of a threat. Yamamoto turned his head to gaze at Aizen. The last time Naruto was here, he managed to cripple Soul Society in one night. Although no real damage was caused, most of our facilities were non-operational, whether because we could no longer find the doors or because the toilets were clogged. Soul Society was in a weakened state for 3 full months while we undid all of Naruto's so-called pranks. This is what Naruto did in one night. I shudder to think what he's capable of now that he's actually trying. We can afford to leave Rukia Kichiki in the living world for now. Aizen bowed his head, stepping backwards. He remembered when he first met the Hollow and had tried to coax him to his side. It was not his fondest memory, and Jin had still not let him live it down. It was the first time he'd ever been brought down to the level of an ordinary being. The first time he'd ever been someone to laugh at. Well, if that is all, I think I will inform my division, said Unohana. The captains turned to look at her, and some of them jumped back in shock. Even Byakuya's eyes widened slightly. Unohana was frowning. There was not a trace of the usual smile that she normally wears anywhere on her face. There was silence as she left the room, not looking back at any of them. Meanwhile, Naruto was watching the captains from a distance. Despite how far away they were, Naruto had somehow managed to hear every single word said. Well, Strawberry, I've managed to buy you a little time. You better make the most of it. But in the meantime, I got pranks to pull. I've been looking forward to this. Heh, I'm getting goosebumps. Rukia was worried. Very worried. Ichigo was down in that pit, and somehow he had to become a Soul Reaper before he hollowified. How the hell he was supposed to do that she honestly didn't know. More than half his time had already been used up, and no visible progress had been made, although it was quite amusing to watch Jinta spit down at Ichigo. But still it was all her fault. Ichigo was doing this to protect her. But if he failed, then well, maybe he'll get lucky and turn out like Naruto. She considered the possibility, imagining an Ichigo in her head with a brown cloak, a goofy grin and a can of spray paint. She frowned. On second thought, one Naruto was more than enough. "Oh ho, Miss Kuchiki, you are the dedicated one," came Kisuke Uruhara's voice from behind her. She turned around to see the annoying enigmatic man walking casually towards her, his cane in hand and his fan held out in front of his face. Staying by Ichigo's side all day and night. Why, you'd almost think you were married to the boy. Rukia allowed some red to rise to her cheeks but otherwise didn't rise to the bait. "Uruhara, what are Ichigo's chances of getting through this?" she asked with a worried tone in her voice. Uruhara put the fan away, realizing this was no time for jokes. "I'm afraid that Ichigo's chances depend entirely on himself. This is a test that has many answers. Ichigo has to find his own. This pit not only speeds up the encroachment, but it isolates him, forces him to confront the only being he can. Himself. For now we can only wait and see." Rukia gave a quick nod of her head. "Is there any chance that he could turn out like Naruto, even if he failed?" she asked somewhat hopefully. "Hey, better annoying than dead." But Uruhara shook his head. Naruto originally looked like such a complex puzzle. A hollow who retained his humanity, right from the beginning. He never even had a hollow form. But once you get the information from him, things become clearer. Rukia turned her head. "What do you mean?" Uruhara's signature grin returned. "When a hollow turns into an Aaronkar, their form changes to that of a human appearance, and their hollow form along with most of their power is sealed away. But Naruto never had a hollow form. He's not even an Aaronkar. So how can he have a Zanpakuto?" Rukia blinked a few times. Actually, that was a damn good question. She remembered him saying he had an actual Zanpakuto spirit. Could it have something to do with that? "Allow me to ask you a question, Miss Kuchiki. What do you think a Zanpakuto spirit is?" "It is a part of oneself," she answered instantly. "An extension of one's soul that is in tune with a spirit." Uruhara nodded his head. "Very good, Miss Kuchiki. Now let me ask you another question. You gave this part of yourself to Ichigo. You gave him all of your spiritual power. Yet if not for my Jugai, you would have eventually reclaimed your own. Tell me, how would your spiritual powers regenerate from nothing?" Okay, now Rukia was really confused. It was a good question really, and she honestly couldn't claim to know why her powers would regenerate, just that they would. "The answer, Miss Kuchiki, is because even if it's not with you, your powers are always right in front of you, with someone you trust. Someone to whom you have entrusted your soul, and through this you are still linked to your own spiritual powers and slowly reclaim them." "Okay," said Rukia, nodding slowly. She sorta got that. "Naruto is the same," Uruhara continued. "Although he lost a part of himself when he hollowed, he somehow managed to leave it with someone else. This part of him that, although separate to him now was still with him, still fulfilling him, became what all separated souls become. His Zanpakuto. I'm still not sure how this is possible, how he managed to keep something he should have lost, but nonetheless it is the truth. Naruto keeps himself in his Zanpakuto, and for this reason he can retain his sense of self." Rukia's eyes widened at what Uruhara was saying. "But if that's true, couldn't I keep Ichigo's missing self?" she asked. "If we are linked through my spiritual power, then that should be possible, right?" Uruhara waved his fan in front of him again. It might have been before. However, your spiritual power no longer resides in Ichigo. It was ejected when Byakuya cut Ichigo's Seketsu chain, a chain that linked him to you. He severed the bond between your souls. He's on his own now." Captain Soifan of the 2nd Division was getting really annoyed. Honestly, how hard can it be to capture one hollow? According to Captain Kuratsuchi, very. According to his analysis, Naruto had two main abilities. One was the ability to replicate himself, although these replications weren't very sturdy. The other was the ability to switch himself with other objects. Kuratsuchi theorized that Naruto uses these abilities in tandem. By creating the clones in key positions, making excellent use of his stealth skills, he switches with them at the last moment, result in a failed attempt at injuring him, and leaving himself in a key position to strike. For this reason, he said a captain should not engage him by themselves. When fighting Naruto, someone else should locate the clone and prepare to attack the second he switches. There was only two problems with this plan so far. It worked the first time they managed to find him, pouring pink dye into the 10th Division's washing machine. Captain Hitsuguya, with the help of Captain Tozen, was able to land a hit to the Hollow's arm. However, it regenerated almost instantly afterwards, and after that, the Hollow took to creating several clones at a time. He could switch with any of them. With a heavy sigh, Soifan strode into the base of the Amatsukido, deciding to inform her lieutenant of the situation. But upon entering, she was rather surprised and rather angry to find the majority of her forces running around in green spandex with orange leg warmers. "You, Kotetsu. Report. What the hell are you wearing, and why the hell is everyone else wearing it too?" Kotetsu stopped in front of his captain and gulped. "Captain, sir, the majority of our forces' clothing is missing. In their place, only these uniforms remained. Also, sir, for some reason the clothing we were wearing began to deteriorate. There seems to be a chemical of sorts in the training room that causes clothing to loosen and begin itching, sir." Soifan smacked her forehead with her hand. This was definitely the handiwork of that Hollow. How could the stealth forces operate now? They were a vibrant green for Kami's sake. Soifan was then treated to one of the most horrifying and mind-scarring sights she had ever seen, when her Lieutenant Marekio Omida came saddling out of a room to her left, the large man having somehow also managed to squeeze into a green spandex suit. You know, these are actually rather form-fitting," he said as he munched on some crisps. "I think I may have a set made. Although it should be in a color more befitting of my regal status. A sparkling gold, perhaps." It took everything Soifan had not to faint from the mental image right then and there. Meanwhile, outside of the base, perched in a tree, Naruto was perched and smiling happily. He put his hands together and gave a bow in the direction of the base. "Worry not, Gai-sensei. Your youthful legacy will live on," he muttered happily. Byakuya had just returned home to his mansion. He had no idea what to think about the Hollow. It did, of course, infuriate him. It had humiliated him after all, defeating him so easily in the human world. But for a moment there things had looked promising. No matter how cold he may appear, he did not want his sister to die. He'd promised his Anna to look after her after all. And if nothing else, the search for her had been postponed. Yes, he was having mixed feeling for the Hollow right now. Up until he caught sight of his mansion. The entire mansion had been painted orange. From the walls to the roof, even the grass and the trees. There was also a fox head that was winking at him painted on to the side of his house. If that wasn't enough, there was underwear hanging from every window. No doubt the elders would throw a fit. If that wasn't enough, a good portion of the garden had been destroyed. But if he stood back enough, he would notice that it was actually words, which had been made by digging up the garden. A very simple message stated, "Orange is an awesome color. It will help make you more stuffy nobles more lively." "Byakuya!" came a bark from the door of the mansion. Byakuya looked up to see one of the clan elders looking at him with an expression of absolute fury. And why was he wearing orange robes? "We have a situation. The elders, including myself, wish to know just what the hell is going on." Byakuya raised an eyebrow, but showed no emotion on his face. He simply followed the elder back into the house, where he discovered that the inside too had been painted a vibrant orange. "The Hollow is going to die," he thought to himself. Naruto had to be very, very careful with this next prank. It was time to fulfill the dream. Do what none other had ever done before. He was going to prank Genryusai Shigakuni Yamamoto, the head captain and founder of the Godai 13. An unmovable and unstoppable force. Naruto had found out all those years ago that the only way to beat Yamamoto was to acknowledge that. You can't stop him, so don't try. You can't move him, so don't try. Although Naruto was glad he could claim at least 8 of the 100 scars that littered the old man's body as being inflicted by him, he could never actually claim to have the ability to defeat the old man. He could outlast him, and at least inflict minor injuries. Well, he might be able to do more if he released, but best not to. His release was not best suited for, well, anything really. Naruto eyed his target warily from a distance. Yamamoto alone has the ability to sense him if he gets too close. He had no idea how. He snuffed out his own Ryatsu signature so completely he shouldn't register on anything, but Yamamoto could tell when he was there. Which was why he had to be very careful. He couldn't prank Yamamoto directly. It had to be done from a distance. Something that had to be triggered. It wouldn't be enough to just paint the old man's house while he was away, oh no. Anyone could do that. But he wanted to prank the old man directly. Something he could tell future generations of Uzumakis, if he ever sired any, if he could actually sire any with pride. As far as Naruto was concerned, there was only one way to go. He had to attack the old man's hair. He wasn't just going to dye the beard a different color. That wouldn't be enough. He was better than that. The old man was deserving of so much more than something so simple. But he had to plan this out. He had to make the old man immobile. It just had to be a second, where he can get close. Naruto grinned to himself. He could do this. He had a plan, and he was going to make it work. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the prankster god of Hueco Mundo. And he was going to prank the head captain of the Soul Society, the strongest Shinigami in existence. Believe it! Face forward. Advance. Don't give an inch. Retreat and you will age. Be afraid and you will die. Shout my name! Zangetsu. An enormous explosion of spiritual power exploded from Ichigo. Urahara Kisuke simply stood and weathered it, but Tezai took the two kids to take shelter behind a rock, keeping them safe from the sand and dust that was whipping around them. Rukia had stayed though, choosing to weather the storm, although she had to hold her arms in front of her face and had been blown back a few feet. When it finally settled, Ichigo was visible once more. Only gone was his broken Zanpakuto. In his hand now was a giant blade, with no hilt, and wrappings around the handle. The edge of the blade was silver, and the rest was a dark gray, almost black. Ichigo stood, transfixed with his new blade. Excellent, cried Urahara happily. You've unlocked your Shurikai, and it looks like quite a unique one. Sorry, Mr. Urahara, said Ichigo. He sounded like he was struggling with something. You'll evade it as best as you can, right? Urahara frowned. He didn't like the sound of that. What? Ichigo raised his sword above his head. I probably can't restrain it. Ichigo swung the sword down. Urahara's eyes instantly widened. Scream Beneheim, he yelled, holding his sword in front of him, pointing to the ground. A red shield appeared in front of him, just in time to hold back a massive wave of blue energy that had appeared when Ichigo swung his blade. The power of the attack was enormous. Much more than Ichigo should be capable of. The attack tore through the ground without slowing down and slammed into the shield. The attack pretty much parted around the shield, but Urahara knew he wasn't out of the woods yet. His shield was beginning to crack. Another instant and the edge of his shield broke down, allowing a bit of the attack to break through the shield. Urahara moved his head to the side, allowing him to survive unharmed. His hat wasn't so lucky. The attack finally died down, to reveal a cracked, broken shield and an unharmed Urahara. If it wasn't for my shield I probably would have lost an arm, he muttered, walking over to where his shredded hat lay. Boy oh boy, you've killed my hat. His face didn't show it, but he was actually crying on the inside. He loved that hat. He'd have to get a new one. Well, he said, looking behind him at the giant chasm that had been made by Ichigo's attack. You passed lesson 3. There was something wrong. Yamamoto could feel it. As he walked the hallway towards the captain's meeting, he was going to get the damage report for everything that had happened to Soul Society so far. Only a day had passed, and he already had Shinigami down in the sewers fixing the plumbing. But now he was getting a bad feeling as he hobbled down the hallway. He knew something he didn't like was about to happen. And he was right when Naruto appeared before him, and he could feel the presence of another behind him. I'm here to end this, Grandpa. 1,000 years of dreaming ends today? Yamamoto raised an eyebrow. Despite his choice of words, Naruto didn't sound like he was here to kill him. Naruto Uzumaki, you are under arrest, the old man said, as he slowly drew Ryujin Jaka. Come quietly, Naruto. I confess I have no desire to unnecessarily injure you. Naruto grinned at him. Well, that's great and all, Grandpa, but the time has come. After today, I will be considered a true legend. Naruto raised his hands and put them together, his fingers making a cross. A second later there were 10 clones behind him blocking off the hall. He heard a poof of smoke behind him and figured that the one behind him had done the same thing. All right, Grandpa, prepare yourself. Naruto shot forward, his arm prepared to swing. Yamamoto swung his blade at a speed even Naruto could barely see. He abandoned his attack to dodge, and got in close to the old man, only he held a hand out. There was a bright flash as a ball of fire seemed to consume the Naruto in front of him. The boy threw a black ball just before he was consumed. Yamamoto simply caught it, although it exploded into his hand. It simply left some black paint there. But before he could ponder it, Naruto appeared above Yamamoto's head, a ball of blue energy in hand. Rasengan! Yamamoto didn't even bother looking up as he stabbed his Zanpakuto upwards through Naruto's abdomen. He knew it was a clone. Is this all you can do, Naruto? You were a bigger challenge before. If he'd bothered to look up, he would have seen the grin on Naruto's face. Gotcha! Suddenly the clone exploded, showering Yamamoto with glue. Yamamoto shielded his eyes as he felt the substance splatter all around his head. He had not known that Naruto could create his clones using other substances. Suddenly 3 more Narutos were surrounding him, all poised to strike. He didn't have time to think, so Yamamoto swung his sword, bifurcating the lot of them. Only they too exploded in a shower of feathers. Yamamoto now realized what this was. Naruto was pranking him. He didn't know whether to feel furious or amused. He didn't really know what to do to stop Naruto though. He was boxed into the hall and destroying the clones was proving to not be a very good idea. Another Naruto appeared in front of him ready to strike. Rather than destroying it, the old man dodged, planning his next move. "I'll burn them all away," he muttered before raising his sword. "Reduce all Cray dash." Before he could finish, a grinning Naruto appeared and simply exploded. There were Narutos beside him stopping him from moving. This was a very well thought out plan, Yamamoto had to admit. But flooding the cramped corridor with clones, he had severely limited Yamamoto's options. As the head captain, he had to set an example, and that meant not destroying the entire hallway just to make the fight easier. There was nowhere he could run from Naruto's clones, and destroying those only made things worse. Curiously, nothing happened when this clone exploded though. Or at least not at first. A moment later, something shot through the smoke and splattered against Yamamoto's beard. It was a sort of green paint. The smoke was a distraction, but he had no idea why the paint had to be delivered in this way. Yamamoto decided enough was enough. He ran to the side, destroying the clones in seconds and doing his best to avoid the consequences. Feathers and glue and paints of several colors were covering the hallways. The clones would occasionally land hits of their own, the smoke clouding his vision. This battle was utter anarchy. He felt Naruto slam onto his head, and then disappear, and another one simply exploded into water against his chest. Finally he broke through the clones, turned around and shot a blast of blue fire down the hall, destroying the rest of them. "Hey Grandpa, over here." Yamamoto turned around to see Naruto at the end of the corridor waving at him. Yamamoto gave a grunt before giving chase. Naruto moved quickly, but he was just as quick. Naruto disappeared behind a door, and Yamamoto followed, only to come face to face with all his captains. They were all standing in the meeting hall. "Capture Naruto at once," he yelled as soon as he saw them. But the blonde was nowhere to be seen. He stretched his senses and found that he couldn't feel the hollow anymore. He was out of range. He turned back to his captains to see they were all staring at him. Of course he was covered in feathers. But it shouldn't be that funny. Although it felt like something fuzzy was on his head. It started small. Shunsui was trying to stifle a giggle, and failing miserably. Yukitake seemed to be laughing and coughing at the same time. Aizen simply had his eyes widened in surprise. Kaname and Kamamura had no visible reaction. Kuratsuchi was simply standing there in silence, as if he was witnessing something he simply could not comprehend. Byakuya seemed to be struggling to keep his face straight. Kenpachi's face had stretched into one of the biggest grins he'd ever seen. Unohana was giggling to herself, and Soifan was trying to stop the corners of her lips from twitching. But it was the reaction of Jin Ikemura that truly concerned him. The man simply broke out into laughter. "Gah ha ha ha! Oh God, I can't stop laughing. Ah, I can't breathe. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Gah ha ha ha!" Soon the captain had actually fell to his knees and was banging his fist on the floor, his eyes open for once as tears poured down from them and onto the floor. "Captain Ikemura, I hardly think a few feathers are worthy of such a reaction," said Yamamoto while frowning. "Actually, head captain, it's more than a few feathers." Unohana stepped forward and held out a somewhat large handheld mirror. She held it at a distance so he could fully see himself. Yamamoto actually allowed his mouth to hang open. When the hell did all that happen? The feathers covered him far more extensively than he thought, but that wasn't all. The green paint seemed to have somehow spread through his entire beard and dyed it lime green. The clone that burst into water, Yamamoto realized. It had blown up against his chest and forced the paint to spread, dyeing his entire beard. The next thing was that his eyes were covered in black stuff, almost making him look like he had panda eyes. The black paint, he thought. He forced me to cover my eyes after I caught the paint to shield them from the glue. The final thing was a big green afro which now sat on top of his head. The first glue clone covered my head in glue, he realized. Then a clone managed to get it on in the confusion. The glue's dry now, it's been glued to my head. Yamamoto was not happy. He was angry. No, he was furious. No, he was more than that. He was boiling with rage. "I don't care how you do it, I want Naruto caught," Yamamoto raged. "And I want it done today." He had reverted Ryujin Jaka into a staff and slammed it against the ground once. Then he turned and left, determined to get as much of this stuff of him as possible. Once he left, the captains were in silence, except for Ikemaru, who was wheezing on the floor, apparently having almost laughed himself to death. Eventually the silence was broken. We never gave our report, said a frowning Byakuya. Naruto was currently shaking the hand of a little girl while thanking her for the paints she'd given him. Ah, that's okay, Whiskers. Hey, did you get a picture? I want to show Kenny and I can have it published in the WA magazine, said the little girl cheerfully. Naruto stopped shaking her hand and nodded. Of course I did, Mini Haruno. Here you go, said Naruto, handing over a photo he'd managed to take rather secretly of the head captain once he'd finished with his makeover. Thanks, Whiskers, said Yuichiro Kusajishi. Then she frowned. Hey, why do you call me Mini Haruno? Naruto grinned at her. Why do you call me Whiskers? Because you have whiskers, she cried happily. Naruto nodded. Yes, and you like just like a mini Sakura Haruno. Hence you are Mini Haruno. Yuichiro just shrugged. Thanks for the picture, Whiskers. And come and fight Kenny again sometime. He said he really enjoyed your last fight. Naruto gave her a big smile and a thumbs up. Sure thing, Mini Haruno. See you around. And then he was gone, leaving Yuichiro to find her own way back, something that would most likely take hours. Hey Rukia, how you doing? Asked Ichigo as he came into the room. He was wiping his face off with a towel, his new Zanpakuto strapped to his back. Ichigo had been training hard for the last 3 days. If she had to guess, he was already around 4th seat level in terms of power. It was impressive to say the least. She smiled up at him. I'm just fine, Ichigo. Although I'm still confused why I can't just get my powers back. I'd be able to help you train that way. Ichigo just shrugged. Urahara said this way is better. I don't like it either. You're a target like this, and as long as that's the case you can't go back home either. Rukia raised her eyebrow at him. Oh, you want me gone, Ichigo? She asked him. Do you think I'm a burden? Ichigo actually managed to sputter as he answered. What? No, that's not it. But Urahara wants you to live a mortal life and die all over again. You'll be trapped here for years, away from your family and friends. I just thought that might be difficult for you. Rukia smirked at him. Don't worry about something like that, Ichigo. 80 years will fly by quickly for me. Although Urahara said it most likely won't come to that. And as for home, it hasn't really been home to me in a while. She didn't explain to him what she meant, but Ichigo didn't need to think too much. From what he saw, her relationship with her brother seemed rather strange. And from what he could gather, that other guy was a friend of hers, but once again their interactions seemed awkward. That was more than just because he was trying to arrest her. If he had to guess, they hadn't saw each other in a while and there was something unresolved between them. Hey, he can be fairly perceptive when he wanted to be. He looked at Rukia. She had her hair down, and her bangs were covering her eyes. He sat down next to her and put a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but she didn't move away. You don't have to worry, because I'll protect you, he said solemnly. Until you can stand in front of your brother again, I'll help you. Rukia didn't respond immediately, but Ichigo saw a single tear streak down her face. I won't thank you, you know, she whispered to him. Ichigo smiled at her. I don't expect you to, midget, he answered. She mumbled something. What? Asked Ichigo. I said I'm not a midget. You're just too tall. Urahara watched the two from the hallway with a smirk on his face. Okay, I'm putting 500 yen down saying those two are getting together. Yorichi popped up onto his shoulder. I dunno. Oriheim seems quite set on that guy, and her chest is nothing to sneeze at. There's more to it than just chest size, you know, Urahara answered sagely. Yorichi just snorted. Like you're one to talk. Urahara closed his fan. Well, I suppose you're right. Are you sure this will work? Asked Shunsui Kairaku from inside a bush. He really didn't want to be here. It wasn't so much the bush he was uncomfortable with, it was the man next to him. Mayuri Kuratsuchi was simply staring ahead of him into the clearing. Yes, I am quite sure. I am very confident in my analysis of the subject, answered the clown-faced man. The bush was next to a clearing, and they weren't the only captains here. Soifan was hidden expertly up a tree, and Jin Ikamaru had insisted on helping as well, saying he found the hollow they were hunting hilarious, and he wanted in on anything involving him. The man was in a different bush. In the middle of the clearing were 5 bowls of ramen, each with steam wafting off in different directions. I designed those ramen with the smile in particular in mind. They can be smelled from miles away. Now shush, something is happening. Shunsui was going to point out that it was Kuratsuchi who was doing most of the talking, but decided to simply be quiet and wait instead. To the left of them a bush had started rustling, and soon a familiar mop of blonde hair appeared atop the bush. Naruto Uzumaki had arrived. He stared in awe at the sight of the 5 bowls of ramen sitting in the middle of a clearing. "Ramen here?" he whispered. "Who would dare waste such a delicious thing?" He cautiously approached the ramen. What if it's a trap? But no one would possibly be so evil as to use ramen for a trap. He sat down next to the bowl and reached out a hand for the chopsticks. Kuratsuchi smirked. He packed enough tranquilizer into that bowl of ramen to put Kenpachi to sleep, and that is saying something. But as Naruto reached for the chopsticks, something happened. "Hey you, back away from the ramen." The captains looked to the other side of the clearing to see another Naruto standing there pointing at the first Naruto in a serious fashion. The first Naruto snorted. "I was here first, go and find your own ramen." With that said, he picked up the chopsticks and was about to dig in when there was a sudden yell. Dynamic entry! The first Naruto was just about able to scrabble back as a third Naruto shot into the clearing, his kick missing by centimeters. The new Naruto growled and turned around to face the third one. "Back away, man, that's my ramen." Meanwhile, in the trees and bushes, the 3 captains were flabbergasted. Obviously, Naruto had created clones to help him with his pranks. And now those clones were fighting over the ramen. The fact that anyone could be this stupid was actually too much for Shunsui to handle, who let out a snort. He quickly clasped his hand over his mouth, hoping that Naruto hadn't heard. Luckily, it seemed the copies too concerned about the ramen to notice him. "How about you back away from the ramen?" shouted a 4th Naruto as he dropped down out of nowhere. "Oh, I got a better idea," said the 5th Naruto, who had come out from behind a tree. "All 5 of us have a free-for-all. Last one left gets the ramen." All the Narutos stopped to think about it before nodding their heads. "Oh, let's do this!" shouted one of the Narutos. The captains had long forgotten which was which. And with that, the copies launched into battle, punching and kicking each other. Soifan actually found herself in awe as the clones battled each other. Although the reason for fighting was as stupid as the clones themselves, their moves were fluid and performed with a practice ease. Their feints and maneuvers were executed perfectly, their timing was down perfect, and their physical capabilities were impressive as well. It was impossible to keep track of all of them, and it was proving difficult to keep track of one. She could definitely see the potential of this in combat. It wasn't that the opponent would be overwhelmed by numerous opponents. It's that they would be locked down, with nowhere to go. A continuous assault that could come from anywhere, every attack perfectly timed and near impossible to dodge. Sheer power is the only way she could think of to get out of it. But the clones were equal in strength, and the fight, though very impressive, was going nowhere. Not a single clone had been dispelled so far. But she couldn't join in. Even if these clones dispelled in a single hit, she didn't think she'd escape unharmed, and most likely it wouldn't serve any higher purpose to defeat these clones anyway. She was interrupted from her thoughts when one of the clones formed one of those blue balls and launched himself at his target. His opponent dodged, and the blue ball plowed into the ground, right in the middle of the assembly of ramen. The clones all seemed to realize what happened, and as one seemed to freeze absolutely still. Once the dust settled, the last clone came back into view. He too had frozen, with upturned bowls of ramen littering the area around him. The captains were surprised when the area was suddenly flooded with killing intent. They watched in a shocked silence as the clones' pupils seemed to dilate, and small black bags formed under their eyes. Their hair seemed to grow spikier and wilder, and their capes seemed to begin moving in a non-existent breeze. The changes were barely noticeable, but they were there. "That bastard destroyed the ramen," one of the clones muttered. "We should kill him." Another clone snorted. "Kill him? No, we should rip him apart, then force a Rasengan straight down his ass." Some of the other clones nodded. Hey, wait a second guys, it was an accident, you know." The Narutos just growled. "You killed the ramen. That's like blasphemy," said one of the Narutos. "It's worse than blasphemy, it's murder," said another. "Blasphemous murderers don't deserve our sympathy," said another Naruto. "And now," said the final Naruto, "you can apologize to the ramen in hell." And with that, all of the Narutos charged, and before the still normal Naruto could react, he took a blow directly to his face. A second later, he crashed into the bush that Shunsui and Kuratsuchi was hiding in before dispelling. The 2 captains were knocked out of the bush and spotted by the 4 Narutos. "Hey, who are you?" "It's Uncle Shunsui." "Hi Naruto," he said a little nervously. "He smells like the ramen," said one of the Narutos. "You mean they have more?" "Maybe it was his ramen." "You mean Uncle Shunsui abandoned the ramen?" The four Narutos turned to glare at Shunsui. Shunsui, seeing the look in their eyes, gulped. Now hang on, Naruto. Let's talk about this. Yamamoto stood in front of the 13 captains, finally ready to hear their reports. He'd managed to get rid of the feathers and the afro, but there was still a light green tinge to his beard. He also noted with curiosity that Captain Shunsui was sporting a black eye and Captain Kuratsuchi was covered in dirt. Captain Soifan seemed to be heavily favoring her left leg, and Captain Ikamaru was trying to stifle a giggle every time he looked at one of them. This meeting starts now. I want you to share reports on the damages caused by the hollow Naruto Uzumaki done to each division. Captain Soifan will start. Soifan stepped forward. Sir, the entirety of the Onmitsukido have had their uniforms and clothes replaced by green spandex suits. The heater has been set on full and cannot be changed, along with the Tadama warmers, making the second division too warm for most members to spend a large amount of time in. The hot spring has been flooded as well. The training room has been filled with a form of powder that causes the clothes of anyone who enters to deteriorate. Also, my office desk and chair has been glued to the ceiling, and our weapons supply of kunai has been replaced with rubber ducks. Soifan stepped backwards, her cheeks flushed red with embarrassment. Yamamoto nodded to her, then turned to Jin before nodding his head for him to report. Well, he seems to have written the words cheer up on the walls. I think it has something to do with motto of our division. I think he kind of has a point, actually. I've never got why our division has something as depressing as its motto. Well, he's painted everything yellow and painted rainbows everywhere. Also, he's placed various traps around the division to give everyone a good laugh. My Lieutenant Kira is currently in the 4th division with a bucket stuck on his head. My personal favorite so far has been Dash. Enough, barked Yamamoto. You are done. Captain Unohana, report. Jin stepped backwards with a pout and Unohana stepped forwards. Damage to the 4th division in general has been minimal. That being said, several of my officers have somehow found themselves in clown suits or stuck in compromising positions. On many of the walls of the 4th division the words laughter is the best medicine has been written. All things said, that is everything that has been done to my division. However, other tasks which are usually seen to by the 4th division have been compromised. Pink and yellow dye has been placed in laundrettes, causing much of the laundry to become unsavory. Several toilets have also blown up, and as the 4th division is responsible for the plumbing, we can confirm the reason for this is that someone, Naruto Uzumaki being the most likely suspect, has filled the pipes with copies of the 9th division's magazine that never got released yesterday. Unohana bowed her head and stepped back, showing she was done. The 5th Captain Aizen Sosuke stepped forward. A large portion of my division found glasses in their rooms similar to my own. For reasons I can't explain, many of them, my lieutenant included, decided to put these glasses on. The glasses are now stuck, and it turns out you cannot see through them from the inside for some reason, leaving half of my division members blind. Also, there's a large hole in my floor with a pot in it, filled with tomatoes. I am unsure if there is any significant reason for this. Aizen stepped backwards and Byakuya stepped forwards. The Kuchiki family manor has been painted orange, both inside and outside, and the Kuchiki elders' undergarments have been hanged from the roof and windows. Other than that, my paperwork has been pinned to the walls of the division and... Byakuya suddenly looked uncomfortable and stopped speaking. Yamamoto noticed this. Captain Byakuya, report, the captain said gruffly. Byakuya schooled his features and continued. Inflated pictures of my sister have been stuck up on my office walls, and inappropriate material featuring illicit relations between siblings in general has been placed randomly throughout the division with my name written inside of the book. There was silence for a few seconds. And then, once again, Jin broke down laughing. He'd been dying to do it for ages, but he'd managed to restrain himself. Oh my god, I love this kid, he managed to wheeze out between giggles. Yamamoto sent a glare at the man, but Jin didn't seem to notice. Moving on, Division 7 report. Kamamura stepped forward. Damage to the division was minimal. We do, however, now have a large gathering of foxes within the division courtyard, and the words "see they're cute, there's nothing to be ashamed of," written on the walls. Kamamura stepped backwards. Shunsui stepped forwards. My cute surrogate nephew left me some brand new sake, which I shared with the rest of my division. It turned out, though, that he had mixed some laxative with the sake, and those of us who had some spent most of today lined up outside the public toilet trying not to soil our breeches. Aizen asked a question. Why do you say we? Your seated officers should have their own bathroom? Asked Captain Aizen. Ah, yes. Well, it was the 8th Division who had their toilets blown up. Anyway, other than that, my dear sweet Nanao is rather upset that her books have been replaced with a series of mature novels called the Aika Aika series. I've never heard of them before, but I must say I am rather enamored with them, said Shunsui happily. Yamamoto growled, but Shunsui retook his place, and Kenaim stepped forwards. The 9th Division has had its printing section commandeered. The magazines that were supposed to be distributed have disappeared, although I think we now know where they have gone. A different spread was created featuring Naruto Uzumaki as the main topic. It also discussed several secrets held by several captains. I decided the magazine was far too inappropriate to be allowed to spread, although my lieutenant said it was a journalistic goldmine if the secrets discussed were true. Other than that, one of the rooms has had the electricity cut and heavy binds set in, allowing no light through. Several of my members' Zanpakuto have been taken and placed in this room along with several non-fatal traps. The words "Welcome to Kenaim Land" have also been written outside the room. Tozen stepped backwards and Hitsuguya stepped forwards. Several hundred false documents have been added to the 10th Division's paperwork. Several photos of my lieutenant taking inappropriate poses have been spread around the division. My lieutenant does not seem unhappy about this. I've also found several packs of diapers in my office, several children's books and a music box that plays a lullaby, said Hitsuguya with a tick mark on his head. He's also left behind several Disney DVDs and a recommendation that in all seriousness I should watch Lion King because it's awesome apparently. Hitsuguya stepped back and allowed Kenpachi to step forward. He replaced all our wooden swords with rubber chickens. And the little shit painted my division pink. He's left messages promoting peace throughout the division, and ones that discourage violence. And Yumachika's hair got dyed the same green as your beard, but I think that one might have been Ichiru. Kanochi stepped backwards and Mayuri stepped forwards. He was silent for a few seconds, and then he started screaming. That little shit released all my test subjects. And he seems to have used some sensitive pieces of equipment to determine how to enhance the flavor of ramen. He's also managed to break every other piece of equipment I have. And he lost me so much research data. He's even destroyed the backups. He's cost my division decades of work. It'll take me years to compile all that data again. I will kill that little shit the next time I see him. And how dare he drag me under the ground and throw apples at my head. Captain Kuratsuchi, if you are done with your report, then step back. Kuratsuchi stopped talking and allowed his mouth to gape open. Without another word he stepped back, and Yukitake stepped forwards. The only damage done to the 13th Division are numerous posters of Rukia Kachiki and a 4-feet list of why her decided fate is wrong. There is also a rather prominent paragraph about a strawberry who will kick the ass of anyone who tries to hurt her. Yukitake smiled and took a step back. Yamamoto nodded. Insufferable music has been introduced into the 1st Division, although most of it has been removed. An object called whoopee cushions have been placed under many of our chairs. Other news is that the Senzeiku has been filled with large stocks of ramen and the message, "I know it would be my choice for my last meal." The walls of the Seriidei have been covered in information about Rukia Kachiki's sentence, which has caused a minor upheaval. And slanderous messages regarding the Central 46 has appeared in several of the inner districts. There were a few more mutterings between the captains as they discussed the information. As well as causing a boatload of trouble, it would seem he was intent on letting everyone know just how bollocks Rukia's supposed execution was. If Naruto's not captured soon, there might be a minor uprising. His capture is your top priority. Go back to your divisions, collaborate with each other and work together. His pranks may seem harmless, but our lack of ability to capture him is making us look weak and the Central 46 are becoming restless. This needs to be resolved and swiftly. Yamamoto slammed his cane, pretty much signaling the end of the meeting. He turned around and hobbled off. But as soon as he was out of sight, he let out a sigh. Where did this all go wrong? He whispered to himself. And then he hobbled his way back to his division. Aizen sat in his chair at the head of the table. One either side of him stood his Shinigami lieutenants Jin Ikimaru and Kenaim Tozen. Sitting around the table were the strongest members of his army, the Espada. He sat smiling at each of them. After that incident with that annoying hollow Naruto half a century ago, he'd lost a good bit of credibility among his Espada. It had took a lot of executions and suppression through his spiritual power to get that credibility back. Surprisingly, Barrigan was the only one who didn't lower his opinion of Aizen at all from the event. He still hated Aizen, make no mistake, but didn't seem surprised at all when Aizen came back covered in paint. He merely remarked "even you" and left. Right now Aizen was staring around the room, smiling his fake smile at all of them. He'd managed to slip out of Soul Society, not that it was very hard, in order to hold this meeting. "I thank you for all coming here on such short notice," he began, speaking calmly. "We have much to talk about. But first some tea." On his order, a few Arrancar maids entered the room, pushing carts with cups on top. Soon all the maids had left, and the espada each had a cup. Aizen looked around the room with his smile on his face, and noticed that a few espada were not drinking their tea. First there was Grimjow, who was eyeing it distastefully. Harabel was holding it but not drinking it. And Stark had his eyes closed, most likely asleep. "Is there something wrong with my tea, Grimjow, Harabel?" he asked pleasantly, although no missed the underlying threat in his voice. They also didn't miss the fact that he didn't ask the Primera. "And no, Master Aizen, there isn't," answered Grimjow, before taking a sip of his tea. His face had a hint of disgust on it afterwards. Aizen smiled and turned to Harabel, smiling at her pleasantly and waiting for her answer. Harabel bowed her head. "With all due respect, Master Aizen, I cannot actually drink or eat anything because of my mask fragment." "Ah yes, of course, how silly of me," answered Aizen, with what he must have thought was an apologetic smile on his face. The espada just tensed further. "Well, to business then. Have you managed to find any of the remaining gods yet?" asked Aizen pleasantly. "Stark, Harabel, I believe these were your assignments." Stark opened an eye. "The one known as Espera is locked away tight in the forests. We found his location, but we can't get past the trees. I considered using Gran Rey Zero, but I didn't want to appear hostile, and in all honesty, I don't think that it would work." Aizen nodded his head with the smile still on his face. "Very well. We will deal with that one later." Barrigan gave a snort and looked away. "Something you wished to say, Segunda?" asked Aizen, turned to face him, his good eye fixing him with a steely gaze. "Among the four of us, Espera is probably the strongest. And even my abilities do not affect those trees. They revitalize at the same pace they rot. And even if by some miracle you manage to get past them, and then by some act of God you manage to defeat him, Espera would rather die with his honor intact than serve you." Aizen's smile never slipped as he answered Barrigan. "Then he will die. We cannot afford to have loose ends, or a force out there that could possibly match my espada." Barrigan's only answer was to snort and look away. Next Aizen turned to Harabel. "Failing him, what of Cuervo?" he asked. Harabel closed her eyes and gave a sigh. "We managed to find the Cuervo wandering the desert far to the south. I led a small fraction of Arankar to face him. He refused the offer I presented him with. Furthermore, a portion of the female Arankar defected upon meeting him." Aizen stopped smiling and blinked. "Excuse me, I don't think I heard you right," he said. Harabel did not answer the question but continued her report. "I warned them that betraying you meant death, but they claimed their precious Cuervo would protect them. Curiously, Cuervo seemed irritated with them. He muttered something about, 'They haunt me even in death,' before slaughtering all of the defectors." Aizen blinked again. "He killed them all?" he asked. Harabel nodded. "Yes, when I asked why, he said he will no longer tolerate fangirls." Aizen was struggling to keep the confused expression of his face. "I came to the conclusion that engaging Cuervo in combat would not be beneficial, as I never saw him move his blade to kill the defectors and they were spread out. I believe his power to be too far beyond my own." Aizen nodded. "Very well, Harabel. That is understandable. He did not gain the title of one of the four gods of Hueco Mundo for nothing, I suppose. I will deal with him myself. Now for the last order of business. I need any information you have managed to find on the third god, Naruto Uzumaki." He smiled pleasantly at Barrigan, expecting him to answer. Barrigan gave a sigh. "Naruto has strange abilities even for a hollow. And I don't mean that annoying habit he has of getting out of any situation without a scratch. The best way to put it is that he is able to give hollows a heart. Although he was the last of us to gain the title of a god of Hueco Mundo, he is in fact the original." Aizen raised a confused eyebrow. "You're speaking in riddles, Barrigan. Speak clearly and explain." Barrigan rolled his eye. "Naruto Uzumaki formed as an Arankar. He is for all purposes a low-class hollow. He never evolved. He just appeared as he is. He may not even be an Arankar. He also has the highest regenerative capabilities I have ever seen." Aizen was silent for a few seconds, allowing his mind to digest the information he had just been given. "I see. And what about his other abilities, Barrigan? I have so far learned he has the ability to duplicate himself and swap himself for other objects. He also seems to be able to create a strange zero which he holds rather than fires." Barrigan grunted. "Most of those abilities can be performed by the other two gods, although the Rasengan, the blue sphere he holds, belongs solely to him. He has various forms of this attack, some stronger and some weaker. Naruto keeps most of his power locked away, for the same reason our Primera does. I would say that he is slightly stronger than Stark until Stark releases. I myself could defeat him after releasing Oswell. Aizen nodded, happy with this information. So even if he releases his Zanpakuto, you two are still stronger. That's good to know. I wish to capture him and study his abilities. Barrigan blinked his eye. That's not what I said. I said I can still defeat him if I release my Zanpakuto and he releases his limiter. Naruto is only at full power when he wears his headband. But releasing his Zanpakuto is a different story. Aizen frowned. Then how strong is he after he uses his resurrection? And once again Barrigan snorted. Resurrection, you say? That is for Arrancar, who had a hollow form. Naruto never did. What he becomes upon releasing is something else entirely. Aizen narrowed his eyes. He was fed up of Barrigan speaking in riddles, no matter how much he enjoyed doing it himself. Then what does he become and how strong is he? Answer the question, Barrigan. Barrigan narrowed his eye. I don't know what he becomes. And I don't know how strong he is. I have only seen it once, and it's not like he needed to stay that way for long. The best way to describe it is to say he becomes his true self. And as for how strong he is, I don't know. I do know my rod ability has little effect on him, or I would have already killed the brat. Aizen kept his glare on Barrigan, but eventually his face softened and returned to his usual fake smile. It matters not. Before the power of Kyoka Suigetsu all things are equal. Now then, I believe that is all we have to speak of today. Haribel, come with me. I wish for you to take me to Cuervo. Aizen stood, as did Haribel, before both walked out the room. Once they were gone, Barrigan stood Oswell before turning to face the remaining Espada in the room. Do not expect Aizen to return. He will soon learn the limits of that Zanpakuto of his. He did not say anything else as he left the room, leaving a room of confused Espada. Captain Mayuri Kuratsuchi of the 12th Division was growling audibly. He'd returned to his division only to find that the doors to his lab had vanished. He remembered that Yamamoto had mentioned last time some facilities had become unoperational because they couldn't find the doors. You think this will stop me, Naruto Uzumaki? I will simply break through the wall if I have to. You will not separate M from my research. Mayuri looked behind him to his apparent daughter. Nimue, smash down the wall. I want into this lab this instance. Nimue bowed her head. Yes, sir, she said emotionlessly. She approached the wall, and with a single punch broke a hole right through it. Another punch, and the wall caved in even more. Soon the entire wall had been broken into. Only what awaited them on the other side was no laboratory. Mayuri's mouth hung open as he stared into what was undoubtedly the woman's public hot spring. Currently in for a soak was half a dozen seated officers, as well as Captain Retsu Unohana and her Lieutenant Isane Kotetsu. Somehow Mayuri just couldn't help but know that this was going to end badly. Some distance away was Naruto, who was observing Mayuri from a tree. Normally this would be the point that Naruto would be laughing his ass off. But somehow karma finally seemed to come back and bite him in the ass today. Ah, damn it, I didn't know Big Sis was in there. It won't take her long to realize I'm the one responsible for this. And then once she's done beating the crap out of Captain Jolly, she's gonna come and kick the crap out of me. Naruto gulped. At first he thought it was a good idea. Opening a gargantua behind the wall and solidifying it with seals. The opening in the baths would be unnoticeable since he'd created the wall exactly as it was in the bathroom. No one would notice it was a different wall. Then Mayuri breaks through the wall out of anger, accidentally finds himself in the baths and get the tar beaten out of him by angry females, the only thing he couldn't dodge. But just his luck, Big Sis had to be in there. Before anyone noticed, Naruto was gone from the tree, already putting as much distance between himself and the crime scene as possible. Soon Mayuri's screams could be heard all over Soul Society, as his Big Sis finally got over her shock. A few moments later Naruto landed near the 2nd Division. He liked it here. It reminded him of Konoha. There was a lot he'd forgotten about Konoha over the last few millennia. But there were some things that were stuck in his head. Names and faces he couldn't forget even if he wanted to. He smiled as he hid from the Shinigami. They were no longer in Guy's spandex outfit. Guess they just weren't youthful enough. Soifan had managed to fix the heating, clean up the hot spring, detoxified the training room and restock on their tools. She'd done a good job in only 4 days. The Fatso lieutenant had paid for most of it though. Curiously, the guy was still wearing the green spandex suit, although he had his Shinigami robes on top of it. Soifan hadn't allowed him to wear just the suit. He had yet to come up with a nickname for Soifan. He'd investigated her a little and found out she had some kind of vendetta against Yo-Yo. Naruto looked around at the now completely clean second division, before giving a grin and rolling up some imaginary sleeves. Clean up his mess in record time, will they? Well then, guess it was time to make a bigger one. There was a clang of metal as two blades came together. One was large like a giant cleaver while the other's was about average size for a katana but was straighter than most were. Curiously, it was the larger blade that was pushed back by the exchange. Ichigo grunted as he was overpowered by Urahara, who disappeared into a Shuinpa, reappearing behind Ichigo with his sword overhead. He brought it down just as Ichigo turned, swinging Zangetsu in front of him to intercept Urahara's blade. Urahara grinned. Very good, Ichigo. It seems you can finally follow me with your eyes. But can you keep up? Urahara disappeared and then reappeared again to the side. Ichigo brought his blade around, blocking another blow. No sooner had the two blades met than Urahara was gone again. Ichigo quickly swiveled to block the blade of an airborne Urahara who was upside down. He spun like a swivel top, allowing the two blades to clang together. Ichigo couldn't stand up to the extra force provided by Urahara's spin. He was sent skidding across the ground, managing to stay on his feet. He was given no room to breathe as Urahara appeared before him. This blade slashed forward and Ichigo was just about able to move, avoiding most of the damage, although his shoulder still took a blow. Blood spurted out, but Ichigo did his best to ignore the shallow wound. Urahara's blade, Beneheim he had called it, flashed out again. This time Ichigo managed to block it, but Urahara pushed forwards. Ichigo found himself pushed backwards off balance. Beneheim came forward again, and Ichigo just about managed to parry, but now he was having trouble standing. Urahara grinned and gave Ichigo no opportunity to regain his balance. He struck again and again until Ichigo was forced to the floor. His blade flashed out again and Zangetsu was knocked to the side. The next instant Urahara's foot flashed forward and lodged itself just below Ichigo's rib cage. Ichigo hurled up blood before he was sent flying backwards from the force of the kick. He hit the ground hard and rolled. But he knew he couldn't afford to take a break. The second he stopped, he brought up Zangetsu and managed to block Urahara, who appeared in front of him, his blade coming down.